Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku has the power to nullify quirks? A special shout out to the original creator, Note 147. This is the permission statement by the author in written. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Over a year has passed since Mirio agreed to become the next bearer of All Might's quirk, One for All, and set out to train and learn to wield such a powerful ability along with his own given quirk, Permeation. He never once imagined that one day he would be approached by the symbol of peace himself and his former sidekick, Sir Night Eye, and be asked to become All Might's successor and inherit his power so that he could continue on as the torchbearer of One for All after All Might was no longer able to. He was a bit hesitant at first, but after carefully thinking it over he happily accepted All Might's quirk, and thus, obtained One for All as his own. Even now, as a student in his third and final year of high school at UA, it still felt like one big crazy dream to him to have the same power as All Might flowing through him, but he was as determined as ever to make his dreams of becoming the best hero in the world come true, and that was coupled with his new dreams of carrying on All Might's legacy and keeping the peace alive. While he was always cheerful and optimistic, even someone like Mirio was aware that it was impossible to save everyone, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to try and save at least 1 million people, which is why he gave himself the hero name Lemillion. His two best friends and fellow members of the Big Three, Tamaki Amajiki and Nijire Hadu, were both aware of their cheerful friend's affiliation with All Might, one of the select few who were made aware of Mirio's newly acquired quirk, All Might's true form and his declining health, and were just as supportive of Mirio as his father, All Might and Sir Night Eye were. Mirio never let his newly acquired powers and role as All Might's successor get in the way of his friendship with Tamaki and Nijire, and the three of them would often train together and maintain their positions as the top 3 and most recognized hero students in all of Japan. Mirio had everything planned out the way he wanted it. The long and sleepless hours of training and improving his quirk had really paid off. He managed to gain an enormous reputation as one of the 3 likely heroes to achieve the title of #1 hero before he even graduates, and his future was looking brighter than ever. But that would all quickly change, surprisingly for the better, when Mirio would meet an unlikely companion that would become his new reason for being a hero, and his goal of saving 1 million people would change to saving 1,000,001. It all started shortly after the UA Sports Festival. Mirio had been enlisted by his mentors All Might and Sir Night Eye to help assist them in an investigation they were currently undergoing. The details of the investigation revolved around a small Yakuza group that have become the prime suspects of a series of unresolved and mysterious crimes which have resulted in several lesser-known pro-heroes mysteriously going missing. But it wasn't their disappearances that was puzzling, but rather the manner in which they were discovered as missing. They apparently weren't discovered as missing until a day or 2 after the crimes were committed. According to eyewitnesses, fellow comrades and close acquaintances of said pro-heroes, the pros appeared to behave a bit unusually during their patrols, but not so much so that it raised alarm for others, and the moment they took a hard blow during a confrontation with a villain, their bodies suddenly turned to a mud-like substance. This led the police to believe that the pros were actually clones of the original, and the real heroes were kidnapped, or worse. While this sort of crime, in and of itself, was very unusual even for a villain organization such as the Shai Hasakaki to conduct, what made the investigation more serious was that the Shai Hasaikai had joined forces with the League of Villains. At first, there was no clear evidence suggesting that the Yakuza are responsible for the disappearances or even that they were working alongside the League, but after reanalyzing the reports, the facts were plain as day. The time of the group's unusual cooperation and the pro-hero's disappearance were far too close together to be considered a coincidence, and given that one of the members of the League was described as having the ability to make copies of anyone and anything, and the missing heroes weren't deemed as missing until their doppelganger were exposed as being fakes of the original, there was no doubt that the Yakuza and the League were both responsible for the disappearances. Although it's hard to say for sure exactly how long the groups have been working together or why they've decided to team up now, Regardless of their reasoning, the Yakuza being involved with the League of Villains or vice versa made things all the more difficult and dangerous, especially since the Shai Hasaikai were known for their involvement in the drug trade and specialized in the manufacturing and distribution of a powerful quirk-enhancing drug called triggers, which was sold for high prices to villains and used to boost their quirks and make them more powerful temporarily. On the same note, there have also been reports of a counter-drug produced by the Hasaikai that has the opposite effect as triggers, in that they can temporarily prevent someone from being able to use their quirks. While the objective behind the Hasaikai remains unclear, the fact that they've come into contact and possibly joined legions with the League of Villains was just asking for trouble. The League are also the ones responsible for creating Nomo by means of experimentation and altering the body to hold multiple quirks, and given the fact that several lesser-known pros have supposedly been kidnapped by the Hasaikai, it is safe to assume that they're being used to make more Nomu. With this information in mind, the investigation team didn't want to take any chances with letting things go on like this for much longer, and they quickly got to work gathering as much intel as they could, but they also didn't want to rush too quickly into things and act careless. Speed and precision was the name of the game. After all, there were innocent lives on the line, and the likelihood that some of them have already been experimented on and are likely either dead or are no longer how they used to be was very high. With Mirio working as an intern at Sir Nightai's hero agency and given the fact that he's made remarkable progress in both his training to become a hero and with being able to properly use one for all, he was seen as a valuable asset for their investigation and would be joining them in taking down the joint villain teams. However, because this was the League of Villains and the Shai Hasaikai they were dealing with, they weren't going to have Mirio battling the leaders of the two villains factions head-on, and instead would have him focus more on providing backup and support for the pro-heroes on the team. Then, the day finally came. Mirio, All Might, Sir Night-Eye and his sidekicks Centipeder and Bubble Girl, Detective Tsukachi and several other pro-heroes and members of the police force gather outside the police station for a brief rundown on their mission. The day prior, Sir had managed to find out where the two villain teams would be meeting at and the date of their meeting, which happened to be the next morning at 8:30 a.m. While the details of the villains' meeting were still unclear, it was safe to say that both leaders would be present. Afterward, the team arrived outside the villains' current location, which happened to be one of the Shai Hasaikai's privately owned facilities. The compound looked like a regular business office on the outside, but according to the intel they received during the investigation, there was a secret passageway underneath the compound that led downstairs and into a massive underground labyrinth that stretches for miles, possibly reaching to other facilities. It was also thanks to Sir's quirk that they knew exactly where the villains were keeping the missing heroes. Turning to face Mirio, who was dressed in his hero costume with a determined and confident look on his face, Sir Night-Eye adjusted his glasses and said calmly, "Remember everything you've learned during your time spent training under me, Mirio. Remember everything All Might has taught you as well. Use this opportunity to gain more experience so you can grow and improve." "That's right, young Tagata." Mirio turned to face All Might, who was smiling at him with his hands on his hips in his trademark pose. "You've made excellent progress thus far and have even secured yourself a position as a likely candidate for the title of #1 hero, but that doesn't mean you've reached your prime. This is the perfect chance for you to really show us what you've got. Now, give 'em hell, young Tagata." Mirio smiled brightly and said while giving a thumbs up to both men, "You got it. Leave it to me." All Might chuckled softly to himself. To this day, he was eternally grateful to Nedzu and Sir Night-Eye for introducing him to Mirio and making the suggestion to make him his successor. He was very reluctant at first because he felt that choosing a successor after receiving life-threatening injuries that caused his powers and overall health to decline over the years meant he was giving up on being the #1 hero and protecting the innocent from danger, but now, seeing Mirio stand before him with his trademark cheerful smile and optimistic, can-do attitude and personality solidified within him that he did indeed make the right decision in picking him. "All right, everybody, look alive," All Might announced before getting into his fighting stance, the others taking up their own stances and preparing to take down the villains and their plot. "It's showtime." "So, how's progress going, Shigaraki? It's been a few days since our last exchange." The sound of an eerily calm voice inquired. The voice belonged to the leader of the Shai Hasaikai who went by the name of his quirk, Overhaul. He sat on the sofa with his two trusted associates, Chronostasis and Mimic, on either side of him. Opposite from him stood Shigaraki, whose face was obstructed by his trademark disembodied hand. Standing behind him were a few of his own associates including Kurojuri, Twice and Himiko. Shigaraki scratched the skin along his neck and let out a sound of annoyance. The last guy you gave me ended up keeling over before I had a chance to do anything. I'm starting to think you're taking more than you need and leaving me with the scraps. And what the hell was up with the last batch of drugs you gave me? They were complete garbage and barely lasted an hour. The man just stared at him calmly, clearly unfazed by his outburst. I understand your frustration, but I did inform you that the effects of these drugs are still only temporary. I am making efforts to improve the quality of these drugs. This is what science is about after all. It's all about making mistakes, learning from those mistakes and improving my craft. Shigaraki scoffed. Yeah, right. Improving your craft, my ass. If that's what you call improving your craft, then this whole thing may as well be a giant waste of time. Overhaul glared at him, his expression hardening. Honestly, you're acting a little too entitled for my liking, Shigaraki. His voice took on a more dark and sinister tone, as did his gaze. Those drugs that I've been graciously giving you, free of charge might I add, are worth more than every single one of these freaks, and I have clients that would pay top dollar to have them, so if I were you, I wouldn't be complaining so much. Then he went back to sounding more pleasant and cordial. But, like the boss once told me, it never does anyone any good being impatient and expecting things to go my way. These sorts of things take time. So try to be more reasonable. After all, we don't want to do anything that may sully our partnership. This made Shigaraki snarl with an angry growl. And if I recall, you're the one who wanted to do this whole partnership in the first place. The only reason I even agreed to it at all is because Master saw you as someone he considered a valuable asset and insisted on having us join forces. The deal was I let you take whatever the hell you want from those maggots, and afterward, you give them to me when you're done on top of giving me those damn triggers, and I'm not happy with what you're giving me. I'm starting to feel like I'm being cheated. If I find out you're giving me defective goods and using the rest for your own selfishness and greed dash. Tamura Shigaraki. Please calm yourself. Kurojiri interjected in a calm voice, not wanting the man to get carried away while they were in the Yakuza's territory. The League was powerful, but even they weren't a match for the likes of Overhaul and his 8 bullets. I may not care about what happens to those heroes, but I can assure you that I would never cheat you like that. Overhaul assured innocently, his tone condescending and filled with fake sincerity. I only take what I need and nothing more. I am a professional after all. Shigaraki glared at him before scoffing and muttering under his breath, whatever, which made Overhaul smirk in amusement, though the plague mask made it hard to tell. Their goal in this whole thing was for 2 purposes: to create an army of strong, durable and all-around indestructible Nomo for Shigaraki to use to put a stop to Hero Society, and to allow Overhaul the chance to bring an end to the hero disease, by producing and selling highly powerful drugs that could both enhance the quirks of those who are injected with it and a counterdrug that could erase the quirks of those infected by the disease. Despite their clashing personalities and polar opposite viewpoints, they both decided to put their difference aside and team up to make both of their dreams a reality. First, Overhaul and his loyal entourage would create chaos and carnage in their wake while waiting for the right moment for a lower-class pro-hero to come to the rescue, where they would swoop in and kidnap them. Then, Twice would come in and create a clone of said hero to avoid any suspicions right away, and finally, Overhaul would clean up the mess they made before fleeing with their prize. Overhaul would experiment on his subjects and gather what he needed from them before using his quirk to repair and restore their bodies back to normal and then passing them off to Shigaraki, where he would then have their bodies heavily modified to hold multiple quirks thanks to Shigaraki's master and All Might's arch-nemesis, All for One. Overhaul would even offer Shigaraki samples of his newly patented drugs to give his Nomu an extra boost in strength and power, albeit temporarily, until he can create longer-lasting drugs. The overall plan wasn't perfect by any means, but as long as they continued to work together and not give up, they would both get what they wanted. Overhaul would get to create and sell his drugs using the quirks of his subjects, and Shigaraki got to create his unstoppable army of Nomu. It was a win-win situation for both of them. "Oh, that reminds me." Shigaraki spoke up. "How's the little brat been doing?" he asked, an evil glint in his eyes and a sinister-looking smirk pulling on his chapped lips. But before the masked man could respond, a sudden blast erupted throughout the facility and caused everyone except Overhaul to jump to their feet. Then, the sound of frantic footsteps and panting came closer until one of Overhaul's lackeys entered the room in a panic and began rambling on about being under attack. Overhaul didn't seem bothered even as he slowly rose to his feet and sauntered over to the distraught man. "Overhaul, sir. The police pantin' and heroes pant dash. They're swarming us dash. We gotta dash." The man never got a chance to finish when he was suddenly disposed of by Overhaul after using his quirk to silence him for good, his expression unreadable aside from the irritable anger glistening in his eyes. "Looks like we've got company. Better go greet them. But first, one of you clean this mess up. You're suspected of the abduction of missing pro-heroes and the production and distribution of illegal drugs. We have a warrant to search the place. We have the right to use force if you refuse to cooperate or try to stop us." The police and heroes fought past the swarm of Yakuza members, with some of them being forced to stay behind to keep the others from being chased down. Mirio was able to take down a large number of Yakuza while activating One for All. The vibrant blue sparks danced along his arms and torso. Once the first roadblock was cleared away, they headed further down into the compound before they arrived at the secret passageway. Suddenly, purple warp gates appeared out of nowhere and a group of Nomu spilled out from the warp gates and the heroes were back to fighting. While they could handle themselves fine for the most part, they realized that the leaders were likely trying to bide themselves time so they could escape. Not only that, the villains would likely use this time to grab the victims and haul them away to someplace else before the heroes could have a chance to get to them. "Lemillion," Sir Night Eye shouted over his shoulder. "Head down to where the victims are and get them out of here. They should be located in the room I specified before. Hurry." The young hero gave a curt nod and a thumbs up. "You got it." And with that, Mirio, along with a few other pro-heroes and officers, made a mad dash down the stairs and through the large winding labyrinth, leaving All Might, Sir and the rest of the rescue team to duke it out with the villains and Nomu. After running through the seemingly never-ending halls, they eventually arrived at the room where the missing heroes were being kept. The room was dimly lit and looked like a mix between an infirmary and a crude-looking prison cell. The heroes were laying unconscious on medical cots with their hands chained to the frames and what appeared to be a metal collar clamped around their necks, likely a type of quirk-canceling device that prevented them from using their quirks. Upon closer inspection, Mirio and the others saw that there were about 4 heroes inhabiting the dark room. The missing persons report stated that between 6 to 8 pro-heroes were missing in total, which meant that either the remaining victims were likely already dead or had been used to make more Nomu. Checking to make sure the victims were still breathing, which thankfully they were, Mirio turned to face the others and gave a thumbs up and a smile. Nodding his head, one of the officers proceeded to radio the others, informing them that they found the missing victims and were preparing to evacuate. Mirio felt relieved that he was able to find and save the missing heroes, though he also felt guilty that he couldn't save the rest in time. He was still happy regardless that they were at least able to save the few they could. Better to save some than none at all. He proceeded to follow the others out of the room and down the hallway when he heard a sudden noise. Listening more closely, he heard it again. It sounded like it was coming from behind one of the doors. "Lemillion, come on." One of the pros called out to him. "We've got to meet with the others and get out of here dash." "Hold on," he exclaimed while holding up a hand. "I think I heard something. It might have been one of the other missing heroes. I'll check it out." Carefully approaching the door, which he noticed had a deadbolt lock on it, where the sound was coming from, he phased his head through the metal door and nearly gasped at what he saw. The room was pitch black, but Mirio could clearly see a small child sitting on a bed in a corner of the room curled into a shivering ball. Mirio immediately ripped the deadbolt lock off the door and forced it open so that light immediately flooded into the room. The child flinched at this and curled into a tighter ball, their shivering increasing. Taking slow and careful steps towards the frightened child, Mirio took in their appearance. The child was a little boy and looked to be around 4 to 5 years old, although he was very skinny and even looked malnourished, which made him appear to be much younger. He wore a dirty, cream-colored hospital robe. His arms and legs were wrapped in bandages and a metal cuff with a chain tied to the bedpost was clamped around one of his ankles. A mane of wild, curly green hair sat on top of his head and a pair of large, matching green eyes peered back at the teen. The look of utter terror and fear swam around in those emerald orbs which were glazed with tears, and tear tracks stained his freckle-kissed cheeks. Though it didn't show on his face, a wave of overwhelming emotions coursed throughout his entire body and pulled at his heartstrings. But he couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment, so after softly shaking his head, he gave the boy a friendly smile. "Hey there, little guy," he greeted cheerfully, keeping his voice soft and gentle so as to not frighten the boy more. The child violently flinched when Mirio tried to move closer. It's okay, don't be afraid. I'm one of the good guys," Mirio assured while holding his hands up and moving them in a placating manner. He gave a big, toothy grin, hoping it would help calm the boy down, but he just stared at him with those large, bloodshot green eyes filled with fear and confusion. Mirio wasn't sure what was going on or why, but one thing was certain: he didn't like the sinking feeling he felt in the pit of his stomach knowing a child was involved in all this. Just then, the pros and officers that followed him entered the room and were shocked at what they saw. They began to frantically murmur to one another while trying to figure out why there was a child in the Yakuza's base. Judging by the look and sound of shock and genuine confusion, none of them saw this coming or were expecting to find a little boy in the mix as well. What made the whole thing even more shocking was that none of them recognized him or knew who he was. He didn't match the description of any missing children in previous reports, and they didn't recall seeing or hearing of a child matching his description being abducted by either villain group. It was as if they didn't even know of his existence until now. Suddenly, a large crash followed by the sound of a struggle caught their attention and pulled them back to reality. "Go on ahead without me. I can handle this." The heroes and officers looked at each other in perplexed confusion for a few seconds before Mirio spoke up again. "I'll be fine. Take the victims somewhere safe and go and help the others. I'll radio you in when I'm finished. If you don't hear back from me in the next minute or so, send backup." The head of the team looked reluctant to leave the teen behind on his own, but he finally nodded and ordered the others to get the kidnapped victims to safety and provide backup to All Might and the others. After they left, Mirio turned back to the scared little boy who was shaking like a leaf and offered him a kind, gentle smile. "Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm here to help, we all are," he said with a cheerful grin. "My name's Lemillion. What's your name?" The child didn't respond. He just kept staring up at the teen, shivering and trembling like a cornered animal. "Is it okay if I come closer?" Mirio asked softly. A few seconds of silence passed before the child nodded his head timidly. Mirio slowly came closer until he was kneeling in front of the trembling little boy, their eye contact now leveled. "Can I touch you?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the boy and watching him carefully. Another nod was his response. Mirio placed one hand on the boy's calf and the other on the chain connected to the old-looking metal bedpost which was attached to the boy by a cuff around his ankle. Mirio had to suppress a furious growl at the thought of this poor, innocent child being left in this dark room while chained to a bed like some animal or prisoner. Whoever was responsible for this, Mirio would assure that they paid for it. "I'm gonna get you out of here, so just hang tight for me, okay?" Mirio said while smiling sweetly at the child. Another timid nod from the boy was his response. This wasn't the first time Mirio had used one for all for something like breaking chains, but it was his first time doing so with a child involved, especially a child who has clearly been abused in some form or another. In fact, this was his first time dealing with an abused child, period. But that didn't mean he was going to shy away from it. He was training to be a hero, and he had to learn to face these types of cases like a professional, no matter the circumstances. Concentrating one for all's energy into his fist, Mirio successfully broke the chain in his grip without causing any harm to the boy. "There we go. Easy peasy," he exclaimed playfully before getting down to the boy's level and offering him his hand, a kind and cheerful smile on his face. Come on. Let's get you out of here. The boy looked up at him with large emerald eyes. He looked genuinely shocked and confused, like he wasn't sure if Mirio was being serious or not. It was as if this was the first time anyone had shown him any sort of kindness, which made the teen's heart squeeze in his chest. With a bit of hesitance in his movements, the boy ever so slowly reached his smaller hand out and allowed Mirio to take hold of it. The hopeful glimmer shining in those gorgeous emerald orbs made the teen's heart swell. But then, he noticed the boy's face suddenly morph in a look of terror as his body stiffened up. Mirio gave a look of concern, not noticing the sinister shadow looming over him. "Oh well, I see you found my little pet." It happened so fast. Mirio barely had time to react when Shigaraki viciously attacked him and the boy, but luckily he managed to dodge the sudden attack while holding the scared child close to his chest. Looking over his shoulder, Mirio's eyes widened when he saw the bed that the child once inhabited had started to turn to a pile of dust. Watching his adversary carefully, Mirio analyzed his movements. So, this is Shigaraki, the same guy who attacked the USJ and tried to kill All Might? Shigaraki cackled lowly and he started to scratch at his neck. And not bad. Not bad at all. You managed to dodge my attack even with all that baggage. I've really got my work cut out for me, huh? He stated condescendingly. Mirio growled at the man's offhanded remark, angered by how he'd referred to the child as baggage. Then, Shigaraki turned so he was facing the two and held out his hand. The same hand that decayed the bed and nearly killed both the younger hero and the little boy. "Now then, I'll be taking that brat from you?" Shigaraki demanded while holding his hand out. Mirio could feel the boy trembling in his arms. There was no way he was going to let this guy take back the boy, not while he was there to do something about it. "That's not gonna happen." Mirio bellowed angrily, holding the child tighter and refusing to let go. Silence fell over them after that. Then, the boy let out a frightened whimper when he saw the anger course through Shigaraki's whole body and contort his features. "I'm not asking you, I am telling you. Give me that brat, now." Mirio took a step back and tried to measure the distance it would take for him to make a sprint down the hall and towards the exit, but the villain gave him no time to prepare as he went to grab the kid at lightning speed. With quick reflexes he managed to hone after months of training, Mirio held the boy high above his head and allowed Shigaraki's hand to pass through him before sending a swift blow to the face while using one for all. The force of the punch caused the man to go crashing through the walls and into the large hallway, but Mirio wasn't going to give the villain a chance to recover as he rushed behind him while still holding the boy close, and struck the man in the back of the head with an equally powerful kick. The blow thankfully was enough to knock the villain down, and judging from the lax state of his body, he was rendered unconscious. "Alright, that should keep him down for now." Mirio huffed out while panting. He felt the child's hand clutching tightly onto the front of his costume, his tears soaking into the fabric. Feeling his heart squeeze in his chest, the teen started to rub the boy's back. "Don't worry, I'll protect you. I'm not gonna let anything happen to you. You're safe now, so don't worry, Dash." He was cut off when the walls suddenly broke apart into millions of tiny pieces and reformed into large, twisting spikes that came from every direction. Like before, Mirio was barely able to dodge out of the way in time, and found the task more difficult while carrying a child. Much like with Shigaraki, Mirio maneuvered the boy and held him above his head while allowing the spikes to pass through him before landing on his feet away from the massive wall of spikes. "That was close," he exclaimed with relief while holding the scared child close to his chest. As the dust began to slowly clear, the sound of someone chuckling in a low voice could be heard, causing Mirio to look around and try to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was difficult to do so after the sudden change in the terrain. Kids these days sure know how to wreck a home. Didn't your mother ever teach you to not barge into somebody's home without their permission? Then, he saw the owner of the voice and felt his blood run cold when he saw the man's face and immediately knew who it was. The leader of the Shai Hasaikai, Overhaul, with his trusted assistant, Chronostasis, standing next to him. Chronostasis wore a similar mask to his boss, along with a pair of round sunglasses and a white hooded cloak. "You'll have to forgive Aizu, he tends to misbehave whenever he doesn't get what he wants, so I put him in timeout. Had I known he would end up making so much noise, I would have made him take a nap instead." Mirio glared at the man's words. Time out? He calls having a child chained to a bedpost and locked away in a dark room timeout? As Mirio stared at the two masked men, he heard movement behind him and instantly jumped out of the way right as Shigaraki was about to attack him again. This shocked Mirio as he hadn't factored in the villain's intense durability and stamina. Heh! This kid isn't just some rookie, is he? He actually managed to knock me down for a moment. He's fast too, definitely not just some rookie hero. Shigaraki stumbled over to where Overhaul and Chronostasis were and began ranting to him. Took you long enough to get your slow-ass self down here, and how about next time you decide to use that insane power of yours, you don't get me dragged down into the rubble with that brat. The masked man chuckled. Oh, I'm sure you would have been fine. Anyhow, enough of the idle chit-chat. He adjusted his glove and gave the boy and teen a look that screamed bloodlust. Aizu, he said in a cold voice. Aizu froze. Come over here now, or else I'll kill this boy and all the other heroes who came here. He ordered bluntly, sounding even more cold and sinister than Shigaraki. His words were powerful enough for Aizu to try and wiggle out of the teen's hold and go back to the villain's side, but Mirio still refused. He was not going to let Aizu return to such evil people knowing that he'll end up being hurt by them. This greatly angered Overhaul. You want me to kill him? I have no issue with tearing him to pieces despite my hatred of getting my hands dirty, so if you want him to live, then you better do as you're told. The boy gasped when he saw Overhaul preparing to remove one of his gloves. No, please don't. Aizu pleaded desperately while looking up at the teen with wide, tear-filled eyes, his little hands trying to push himself away from the teen. Please. He's gonna kill you if you don't run away. Please, leave me and get away dash. It's okay. Don't listen to him, Mirio assured loudly while glaring at the villains. Overhaul slowly walked over, his hand now glove-free and a menacing scowl on his face, hives prickling over the skin around his brows from having to expose his skin to the air that he deemed as filthy and unclean. You see what you make me do when you don't listen, Aizu? You make me dirty my hands up because you're too selfish and stubborn. That behavior of yours will only get others killed. You really think these guys care about some quirkless little nobody like you? Don't make me laugh. Mirio flinched at the mention of Aizu being quirkless. He saw Aizu's face become drained of its color and his eyes widening with fear. No way. He's quirkless? Overhaul smirked behind his mask upon seeing the look of defeat on the child's face and continued to guilt him. These so-called heroes don't care about a quirkless brat like you. Why would they? You're nothing but an extra mouth for them to feed. Anyone else would have left you to die alone somewhere, and they wouldn't have thought twice about it either. The only reason they would want to save you at all is so they can fluff up their ego and make themselves look better. To them, to everyone, you're nothing but a burden and a waste of a life dash. That's enough. Mirio bellowed in anger, having finally had enough of the man spewing such cruel and disgusting things to a small child, his simple, gentle eyes glowing with a vibrant blue hue. How can you say such things to an innocent child? Overhaul kneeled down and placed his bare hand on the ground while giving the young hero an indifferent expression. Don't flatter yourself and act like you're any better than the heroes of this diseased world. You only want to save this boy so you can make yourself feel better. The spiral of spikes suddenly broke apart into tiny pieces again thanks to Overhaul's quirk. The pieces surrounded the teen and child before merging back into a new spiral of spikes. Mirio managed to dodge them again, but as soon as his feet landed on the ground, he was attacked by Shigaraki, who rushed forward and attempted to grab Aizu. Mirio was able to avoid his attacks by using his quirk right as Shigaraki went to touch him, but it was difficult to do so while also preventing Aizu from being ripped from his hold. He wouldn't put it past a guy like Shigaraki to intentionally use his quirk on the boy. Between Overhaul's frightening ability to disassemble and immediately restore anything he touches, including people and small kids, and Shigaraki's equally frightening ability to disintegrate anyone and anything he touches, Mirio's skills were definitely being tested. If he slipped up even once, he would be killed, and Aizu? He didn't even want to think about what they would do to him, and he wasn't planning to let it happen. Aizu knows he's unwanted by society. In a diseased and cruel society where those who possess the strongest and most powerful quirks are seen as godlike and worthy of the title of a hero, and those with weak and unimpressive quirks are looked down on by others. A quirkless boy like him would never stand a chance at fitting in. If others were ever to discover he has no powers to speak of, he would be deemed an outcast and left to fend for himself. Overhaul and Shigaraki continued to go after Mirio while the latter did his best to dodge and evade their attacks without letting Aiza get hurt. The masked man's words looked to be hitting Mirio in just the right way, so Overhaul continued to antagonize him until the right moment came where they could throw him off and snatch Aizu up again. That's why Shigaraki decided to take him in. He makes for a far better pet than anything of practical use. Until the day we joined forces, and Shigaraki introduced me to him. I took it upon myself to research and perform tests on him so I could mold him into the perfect tool, and thanks to his lack of a quirk, he has no means of defying me. Upon further testing, I learned that, despite not having a quirk, Aizu's genetic makeup is quite unique. The molecular structure of his cells, the part that prevents his body from being able to house a quirk, is mutated, and when combined with a specialized enzyme that can enhance the factor of these cells, actually has the potential to be used as a weapon that can destroy the properties of one's own powers. My quirk-canceling bullets may not be perfect right now, but I'll continue to salvage Aizu for what he's worth until I've managed to create the perfect product. And as far as teaching him discipline, I'll continue to break him until he learns to be a good boy and submit to my will. That phrase made Mirio's breath hitch in his throat. Suddenly, Mirio began to feel lightheaded and dizzy. This resulted in him losing his footing and stumbling into the base of one of the large spikes. His grip on Aiza becoming more loose. What is this? It's like, my sense of balance is. He then heard what sounded like liquid dripping, splashing and sloshing from above, and there, hanging from the steel beams was a man wearing a similar plaque mask as his boss and pouring vodka into his mouth while he hung upside down. Wee-hee. Feeling a little drunk, are ya? Like ya hick can't stand up stand up straight. He's me either, bud. That's why I'm Hanjin, round up here. Better not stand too close to me if you don't wanna get plastered. Ha. The more the man drank and used his quirk, the harder it became for Mirio to keep his hold on Aizu. Unfortunately, his grip did indeed loosening enough for him to accidentally drop Aizu while also falling flat on the ground in the process. Chronostasis used this time to calmly stroll over and scoop Aiza back up in his arms before taking a step back, maintain distance so he was out of Mirio's reach. Mirio crawled back to his feet and proceeded to try and run towards the two villains but was instantly stopped by a man wearing a similar beak-like mask, a black cloak and a matching black bowler hat. The cloaked man then shot at Mirio, who was able to activate his quirk so the bullets wouldn't hit him. Oh, that's a different quirk. How did you do that? The cloaked man questioned while discreetly activating his own quirk. It's called permeation. When I use it, I'm able to pass through any solid object. Mirio explained before immediately slamming his hand over his mouth, chastising himself for giving away such sensitive information to the enemy. Shin, Idoro, glad that you finally decided to join us? Overhaul stated with a hint of annoyance in his voice. My apologies, master. The man named Shin stated. It took me a bit of time to slip past the intruders, but thankfully, those things are keeping them busy. Shigaraki shot him a furious glare. Hey, don't call my Nomu things. They're far more useful than you lot dash. That's enough. We're done here. Overhaul huffed before turning around and walking away, with Chronostasis close by and Aizu shivering in his grasp. Finish him. Mirio gritted his teeth while struggling to stand. His head was swimming and he could barely see straight, but he was able to make out Overhaul and Shigaraki walking further away with the terrified child in tow. No. I can't let them get away. Despite his equilibrium being off, Mirio focused on concentrating his power throughout his entire body and felt the familiar tingle from the vibrant blue sparks that danced along his body. Ultimate move? Now die! Shin and Didoro shouted in unison as the former shot several bullets and the latter threw daggers at the staggered teen, but were both shocked as Mirio phased through the floor before re-emerging at neck-break speed from different directions before being struck hard in the gut, which sent them flying in the air. Phantom Menace. After regaining his bearings, Mirio finished them off by landing a barrage of punches all over the two men, each blow being charged with a massive boost of energy and strength thanks to One for All's power coursing through the teen's body. Power! Catching the sudden noise from the brawl, Overhaul turned to see what was happening, only for Mirio to appear out of nowhere behind them, spinning in a circular motion and sending a swift kick and punch to the villains while simultaneously avoiding hitting Aizu thanks to his permeation. Overhaul managed to dodge the kick, but it didn't stop him from receiving a scrape on his cheek. The blow hit Shigaraki in the side of the head, knocking him down, and struck Chronostasis square in the face and crushed in his mask, which caused Aizu to go flying in the air, but not for long as Mirio jumped into the air and caught him in his arms again before landing on his feet. "Don't worry, Aizu. I've got you," Mirio declared gently while Aizu stared at the teen in wide-eyed disbelief. "Why? Why did you do that?" Tears welled up in the child's emerald eyes. "You risked your life to save me, even though I'm quirkless?" Aizu saw the bright smile spread over the young hero's face as he said in a cheerful voice, "Of course I did. Quirkless or not, I would never abandon someone in need of help." He then gave a big toothy grin and a thumbs up. "Because that's what a hero does. They help people, and that's what I'm gonna do for you, because I'm your hero." Aizu was awestruck and completely speechless. While the powerful blow was enough to hit both Shigaraki and Chronostasis and throw Overhaul off, it wasn't enough to give Mirio a chance to escape, especially when Overhaul became enraged and infuriated from being touched by Mirio while furiously rubbing his face and muttering venomously to himself, "Filthy, filthy, filthy, filthy." Meanwhile, Shigaraki staggered to his feet and glared at the teen. The hand that had been covering his face was now laying on the ground, exposing the pale, dry skin under the man's eyes and around his mouth, and especially the menacing look in his crimson eyes. Chronostasis was still incapacitated, but that didn't make much of a difference if the two more dangerous villains were still able to move and fight. Mirio frantically looked around and saw that all of the escape routes and exits were now blocked off by the newly formed terrain thanks to Overhaul's quirk, and while he had no trouble slipping past the obstacles, he wouldn't be able to while carrying Aizu. With All Might and the others still battling the rest of the villains up above and no other backup, Mirio would be screwed if he didn't come up with something, unless… "Aizu!" he whispered softly to the child in his arms. Aizu glanced up at him curiously. "I'm going to do something with my quirk, and it's going to make you feel a bit weird for a moment. You're not going to be able to see, hear, or breathe for a few seconds." Aizu gave him a look that was a mix of bewilderment and fear, but Mirio was quick to reassure him. "It's only for a moment, I promise. It'll give me time to get you out of here. I promise you'll be okay. Do you trust me?" Aizu stared at him for a moment, pondering the teen's words before he finally nodded. With a big smile, Mirio wrapped his arms tightly around his small body and said, "Okay. Close your eyes and hold your breath, Aizu." The boy did just that. Mirio proceeded to activate One for All and began to increase its power by over 50%. The bright blue sparks dancing erratically around the both of them, and his eyes were practically glowing in that same blue color. "Here goes nothing," he thought to himself as he saw Overhaul and Shigaraki launch an all-out attack at the same time and charge for him. While still activating One for All, Mirio activated his permeation at the same time, but this time, rather than just himself permeating through the ground, Aizu's own body began to permeate as well, thus rendering him incapable of seeing, hearing, and breathing, just as Mirio said would happen. He was scared at first, but he also trusted Mirio and pressed himself closer to the teen's muscular chest as they sank down into the ground, and just like with the 2-8 bullets, Mirio unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks onto the villains before sinking back into the ground and propelling himself and Aizu on the other side. Ultimate move, Enhanced Phantom Menace, plus Ultra. Mirio shouted victoriously while smiling proudly, a look of unwavering confidence glowing on his face as he then shouted triumphantly, "Power!" The super move in question was a move that he'd recently learned to perfect, and it consisted of using one-for-all strength to increase the power of one of his own super moves, which allows for anyone he's carrying to be able to temporarily permeate like Mirio. The move itself, while incredibly powerful and useful, was also very hard to pull off without wearing the teen out, since he's having to focus most of his energy into allowing the person he's carrying to permeate as well. But at least they were safe. Unfortunately, their victory was short-lived as the walls and ground started to break apart once again and parts of it even started to decay, likely as a result of Shigaraki's quirk. The walls of the hallway suddenly broke away and crumbled into pieces, revealing the two leaders as they charged after the two boys once again. Mirio was preparing to flee since the super move he pulled had greatly exhausted him, when suddenly, boom! Another giant blast blew a huge hole in the tall ceiling above them, and Mirio was relieved when he saw All Might and Sir Night-Eye leap from the opening and towards the villains. Texas, Smewash! The man bellowed as he threw a powerful punch in the direction of the villains only for them to dodge out of the way and make another attempt to reach for Aizu. They were stopped again, only this time, by Sir Night-Eye, who used his trusty high-density seals which weight over 10 IBS. Each and managed to strike the men hard in the face. Mirio smiled brightly, his eyes filled with relief. All Might, sir, he exclaimed happily, Aizu still snuggled to his chest with his eyes closed. Apologies, young Tagata. All Might apologized. We heard what had happened and tried to come to your aid as fast as we could. These Hasaikai sure aren't pushovers. Sir adjusted his glasses. We were told that there was a child being kept in captivity as well as the missing heroes. Is this him? He asked while glancing down at Aizu, who looked to have fallen asleep after Mirio used his super move. Mirio nodded. Yes, it is. His name's Aizu, at least, that's what the villains call him. The two heroes nodded in understanding before all three of them heard movement coming from behind them. Overhaul and Shigaraki crawled out from beneath the pile of rubble, the latter of the two glaring menacingly at All Might. And he's, All Might, I'll make you pay for this. He hissed angrily, his fingers flexing and releasing. You've made a fool of me once before, so don't think I'll let you get away with it again. He then proceeded to sprint over to the heroes who all took up a fighting stance, even Mirio despite his fatigue. I'll kill you dash. Just then, he was stopped when a warp gate opened up before him, catching the heroes and even Overhaul off guard. Then, a voice began to speak. Tamura Shigaraki. Overhaul. We must retreat. The voice, which turned out to be Kurojire's, called out as another warp gate opened up in front of Overhaul. Shigaraki looked annoyed and began to argue, but Kurojire wasn't having it. There are too many of them, Tamura. We're surrounded and there are more on the way. We must retreat for now. Kurojire insisted, but Shigaraki wasn't listening. Damn it, Kurojire. I am not letting All Might beat me again, and I am not letting him steal my pet dash. Enough. Shigaraki turned to look at Overhaul, who was about to step into the warp gate. You'll get your chance to kill All Might next time, but for now we need to leave. With that, he disappeared into the gate, leaving Shigaraki there with a scowl on his face as he turned to face the heroes and send a glare at them. Arg, fine. You win again, All Might. But don't think this is over. I will kill you someday. His gaze shifted over to Mirio and Aizu, and his eyes narrowed. And don't think this is over between us, kid. I'll get my pet back, and when I do, I'll make sure to kill you after I take back what's mine. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, heroes. And with that he was gone. As were the members of the League of Villains and the 8 bullets of the Shy Hasaikai. The only ones who didn't get away in time were almost all of the Nomu and a few members of the Yakuza. While they didn't succeed in capturing the 2 leaders, the rescue team did succeed in saving the remaining kidnap victims without any casualties, and thanks to Mirio, they even saved a helpless little boy who was likely being used as a test subject for the 2 villain groups. For Mirio, that was by far the greatest accomplishment of all. Knowing that he was able to save an innocent child from the clutches of his captors was something he would carry with him even after becoming a full-fledged hero. Following the successful rescue mission, the victims, as well as any heroes/officers, were immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment, while also hauling the few criminals they managed to detain off to jail after they too received treatment at the hospital. Thankfully, nobody sustained any life-threatening injuries, and the few who did would likely make a full recovery after a day or so. The Nomu that were also present during the raid were quickly taken to the police station for DNA analysis to see if any of them were possibly the remaining pros who were also kidnapped. Though given the amount of time said heroes were missing for and the time in which it would take for the League of Villains to turn their victims into Nomu, it was highly likely that none of the others were still alive and did, indeed, get turned into Nomu. The police also took the time to gather statements from everyone, including the kidnap victims. The witness statements from the pros who were held captive would help police with moving the investigation forward, and hopefully, it would help to shed some light on the true intentions of the villains as well as uncovering more info on Aizu. Speaking of Aizu, he'd fallen asleep shortly after the ordeal had ended and was promptly brought in for treatment. He didn't look to have sustained any injuries during the raid, but considering the state they found him in, it was better to be safe than sorry. After being admitted at the hospital, he was then placed in quarantine out of fear that he may have a quirk that they weren't aware of and didn't want to take the chance of him accidentally activating it. Mirio tried to assure them that he was quirkless, but the doctors wanted to take every precautionary measure they could until they could confirm that he was, indeed, quirkless. As much as Mirio didn't like the idea of the child being treated like a prisoner once again, he reluctantly agreed and allowed them to do what was necessary. At least he was finally out of that hell and in the care of trusted professionals. As for Mirio, who ended up facing off against the two leaders of the joint villain organizations in the end, he surprisingly didn't sustain injuries that were too serious or life-threatening, aside from receiving a fracture in both of his wrists and ankles, likely due to pushing himself and going past his limits while using both One for All and his permeation quirk. He was perfectly fine. Even Recovery Girl was surprised by the lack of injuries he had after using One for All in such a manner, though it didn't keep her from scolding him for using such a tricky and borderline dangerous move while handling an innocent civilian. As much as it stung him to hear the woman say that, he knew that she was right. While he was able to use his super move successfully in order to avoid the villain's attacks, the move he executed was very tricky to get a handle on, and if he'd slipped up even for a second, it could have resulted in deadly consequences. But regardless, he was glad it worked out like it did. Then came the slew of questions that flooded his mind, as well as the minds of everyone else in the loop. Who exactly was Aizu? Where did he come from? Why was he being kept hidden away by the Yakuza? What was his affiliation with the Shai Hasaikai and/or League of Villains? Was he actually the son of one of the members, or was he also a victim of kidnapping? Was he kidnapped prior to or during the time of the pro heroes going missing, and if so, why wasn't there a missing persons report made for him? So many questions with hardly any answers to go with them. While the missing heroes were rescued, given medical treatment and then reunited with their families and loved ones, the investigation was far from being over. The leaders of the villain organizations and their associates were still on the loose, and the likelihood of them attempting to kidnap more lesser-known heroes or civilians and resume their evil plans was very high. While Mirio was no longer needed for the remainder of the investigation and was allowed to return to his school life, he felt that he couldn't just go back to living his life without knowing if Aizu was okay. How could he just return to his normal life after having saved a little boy who was essentially invisible to the world had it not been for him discovering that he was there at all? Had it not been for him stumbling upon the trapped child, the others never would have known he was there, and that was something that bothered him the most. Regardless if his aid was no longer needed or not, Mirio wasn't going to let this go. As he laid on his bed back in his dorm later that evening, he made himself a promise. I swear, I'm not going to turn my back on Aizu. I won't abandon him. I'm going to be there for him, and I'll be the kind of hero that he can look up to. The next day, after classes let out, Mirio left the school immediately and returned to the hospital to check up on Aizu when he was stopped by Tsukachi and asked to speak with him. They arrived at a vacant conference room on the upper floor of the hospital where All Might and Sir Night Eye were also waiting, having already been filled in on any updates regarding the investigation, which left Mirio the only one in the dark. Once everyone was present and accounted for, Tsukachi began to fill Mirio in on what he and his team were able to find on Aizu, which was very little in terms of background information. So far, we haven't been able to find anything on him. His birth certificate and medical records, his parentage, or even his full name. he explained with a perplexed look. Not to say that we won't be able to find anything, but as of right now, we have very little to go off of, and considering that there isn't anything in the missing persons reports of a child matching his description, it's almost as if he doesn't even exist. Mirio felt his stomach sink and his palms become clammy. How can there not be anything on him anywhere? He questioned. What about the heroes who were kidnapped? Did they know about Aizu? Tsukachi shook his head. During questioning, we asked them if they had any awareness of a child being there during their imprisonment, and according to them, they didn't know there even was a child. Likely because they kept them separated or the villains never allowed him to see the heroes. And considering we also still don't know exactly how long he was held captive for also makes things a bit more difficult. Mirio lowered his head. I see, he muttered. A comforting hand was placed on his shoulder, and when he looked up, he saw Sir glancing at him with a slight smile. Don't worry, Mirio. All that matters now is that he's safe. And it's thanks to you that we were able to get him away from that awful environment. You're a hero, Mirio. Mirio managed to smile at his mentor's words, feeling a bit better. That's right, Tsukachi said. We'll continue to do our part in finding out who he is and who his parents are. We'll also make another report on him and spread the word to see if anybody recognizes him as theirs. For now, all we can do is keep an eye on him. Tsukachi was cut off when a nurse suddenly barged in, appearing a bit panicked as she looked straight at Mirio and said, Tagada-kun, I need you to come with me, please, she exclaimed. Mirio instantly stood from his seat and began following her, with the other men following close behind. What's going on? Is everything okay? Mirio asked frantically, worried that something was wrong, but also confused as to what it had to do with him. It's Aizu, the nurse explained, which caused Mirio's eyes to widen a bit as he started walking a little faster. Aizu. Is he okay? What's wrong with him? They climbed the 2 flights of stairs and continued walking down the halls, and even before they reached the room where Aizu was being kept, the sound of high-pitched screams and wails caught the teen's ear, making his heart rate speed up. He woke up just a few minutes ago. We started to check his vitals when he suddenly started screaming and crying. He refuses to let anyone come near him, and if we try to, he just screams even more. She looked at the teen with a knowing expression. He keeps demanding to see the hero who saved him, said he goes by the name Lemillion, I believe. That was enough for Mirio to start walking past the nurse who tried calling out to him to slow down. The sound of the terror-filled screams and cries became louder and louder before he finally reached the room where the wails and shrieks were coming from. No. No, get away. Get away from me. Please don't touch me. Stay away. Upon stepping into the room, Mirio saw Aizu backed up against the headboard or his bed and curled into a tight ball while rocking back and forth, and 4-drip was attached to his right arm, and his arms and legs were no longer wrapped in bandages, revealing a massive array of scars that decorated the skin. 3 other nurses surrounded the bed while keeping a good 2 to 3 feet away from the child, but even that didn't seem to do any good. The sound of the boy's heartbreaking sobs and cries made Mirio's heart ache for him. Without even being given permission to enter, Mirio walked into the room, which grabbed the attention of one of the nurses who looked relieved to see him. Aizu uncurled himself slightly and lifted his head up, his face red with tear streaks covering his freckled cheeks. The moment his bloodshot eyes landed on the muscular blonde teen, Aizu gasped and held his hands out to him. Mirio didn't skip a beat as he quickly walked over and sat down on the side of the bed. The child immediately crawled over and climbed into Mirio's lap, curling into a tight ball against his chest. Mirio's heart squeezed tightly as he cradled the small boy, holding him in a tender embrace. It's okay, Aizu, it's okay? Sure, I'm right here, I've got you. You're safe, no one's going to hurt you, I promise. He adjusted the boy in his lap and held him close to his chest. Aizu wrapped his arms around the teen's neck and held on for dear life while burying his face into his shoulder, his tears soaking into Mirio's black t-shirt, but that didn't bother him at all. If it helped to calm the frightened boy down and make him feel better, he couldn't care less if his shirt got drenched with tears. Once Aizu had finally calmed down enough to where his sobs and whimpers turned into soft sniffles and hiccups, the nurses carefully approached. He seems to really trust you, which is good. one of the nurses said with a sad smile. We would have ended up having to restrain him otherwise, which is the last thing we'd want to do. It may make things a bit easier on us with you here, so if it isn't too much trouble? Mirio smiled brightly and nodded. Not at all. I'll keep him calm while you guys do your thing. And with that, they quickly got to work checking Aizu's vitals while Mirio continued to hold him and shush him gently, his hand rubbing soothing circles along his back. Occasionally, Aizu would start to whimper again whenever he saw one of the nurses getting too close to him but would instantly calm down upon feeling Mirio's large, warm hand rubbing over his back while he whispered soft reassurances to him. After a couple of minutes, they were done, but Aizu still refused to let go of the young hero, not that Mirio minded, of course. The doctor was able to do some blood work on him while he was sleeping. One of the nurses explained to Mirio and the 3 adults in the room. It'll take some time for the results to come back, maybe a day or so, but they should give us an idea of his exact age. We were also able to gain samples of his saliva and hair, which will help us to determine who he is and who his parents are. The doctor will let you know if he's healthy enough to be released, but until then, he should probably get some sleep and maybe get some food in him. The nurse then exited the room along with his other colleagues, leaving Aizu alone with Mirio and the 3 men. He really does trust you, young Tagata? All Might said with an amused grin. Mirio nodded as he felt the boy's body relaxing in his hold, indicating that he was starting to drift off to sleep. Yeah. Sir watched the tender moment with a soft grin on his usually stern face. Despite the circumstances, it warmed his heart to see his pupil bonding with a child whom he'd saved. However, his smile fell when a sudden thought crossed his mind. We still have the issue of what will happen next in regards to the child. Mirio glanced up at the man slightly confused. Tsukachi gave a slow nod. Even if we do put out his photo in the hopes that someone will come forward, it's unlikely that it'll happen right away. There's always the option of placing him in foster care for the time being. No way! Mirio shouted a bit too loudly, as this caused not only the adults to jump from the sudden outburst but also Aizu, who had finally fallen asleep but flinched at the sound of the teens yelling. Calming down and soothing his hand over Aizu's back, Mirio spoke again. I'm sorry, you can't put him in foster care? He insisted with a pleading look on his face. Aizu is quirkless. I've done my research on what it's like for quirkless kids living in foster care, the treatment they receive from both kids and adults, the way they're ostracized. We may as well send him back to live with the Hasaikai if that's the case. Mirio! Sir Night Eye exclaimed in a stern and warning tone, but Mirio wasn't fazed by this. You know it's true, sir. You all do, so why would you think this is okay? There's no way I'm letting him get sent to a place that'll treat him just as badly as the villains did. The room fell silent after that. None of the men were able to find the words to say. While they understood Mirio's concerns, that still didn't solve the issue of what to do with Aizu until someone came forward to claim him as theirs, when or even if that happened. I understand your concerns, Mirio, Tsukachi said calmly. However, we still have to take into consideration that his family is likely still looking for him. How do you think they would feel if they found out their son was being held captive by villains? Mirio fixed him with a slight glare. With all due respect, sir, you said so yourself that there hasn't been any reports of a child matching his description who's been reported missing. If his family is supposedly looking for him somewhere, then why haven't they made any attempts to come forward and get him? You even said that you couldn't find his birth records, so what does that mean for them? The man went silent, which allowed All Might a chance to speak up. That's not the only issue here. While it's still too early to say, it's possible that he was kidnapped by the villains prior to or during the time of the other kidnappings, which means there's a chance they'll try to come after him again. If we were to place him in foster care, what's stopping the League and Yakuza from infiltrating the facility and snatching him up again? If anything, that would put other children in danger. They all fell silent after that, pondering everything that's been said and trying to think of a solution. Why the long faces? I must say it doesn't suit either of you. They turned to the door and saw none other than Principal Nedzu entering the room. Mirio and All Might were a bit shocked to see the principal here of all places. Mr. Nedzu, sir? All Might exclaimed but then lowered his voice when he noticed Aizu stirring a bit from the sudden noise before relaxing again. "What brings you here, sir?" The animal merely smiled before walking over and hopping up onto one of the vacant seats near the bed. "I was informed by Mirio's homeroom teacher and one of the police officers of the recent events and decided to pay him a visit," he explained cheerfully as his beady black eyes gazed at the small child sound asleep in the third-year student's arms. "I was also informed of the little one's situation, and I believe I may have a solution." Mirio sat up more upon hearing this. "A solution? You mean for Aizu?" he asked hesitantly. Nedzu nodded. "Yes. And whether it's temporary or not depends on the investigation team and other factors that may play into it," he stated vaguely. "And what would that be, exactly?" Tsukachi questioned. Nedzu turned to the man and said with a confident smirk, "Since UA has been established as a boarding school since the start of the new school year, we'll have him placed under our care for the time being." Mirio was stunned by this. "What? You want Aizu to live in the dorms at school?" he stammered out, sounding as if he didn't hear him right the first time. A curt nod from the small animal was his response. "Of course. Why not? It's not as if we don't have the space for him, and also, it'll assure that the child will be under the protection and care of pro-heroes, which will lessen the chances of the League of Villains or Yakuza attempting to take him again. Besides," Nedza glanced back at the small boy and smiled softly. "Something tells me that Aizu would be quite upset if he were forced to be apart from you, and you seem to have grown quite attached to the little one." Mirio's cheeks became stained in a pink blush at the principal's words, but he couldn't help but feel so happy. Yeah, I guess you could say that," he admitted sheepishly. "So, you're really wanting to place him in the dorms at the school?" Tsukachi inquired. Nedzu nodded. "Yes. If that's not an issue with you, Detective?" Tsukachi shook his head. "No, not at all. I really appreciate your help with this. If you need anything or have any questions about the case, please feel free to let us know." Nedza smiled. "Of course. Likewise, please feel free to notify me of any updates on the case and if there is anything I or the rest of the faculty can do to assist you. In the meantime, Mirio." The teen sat up straight. "Yes, sir? Since you were the one who rescued Aizu, I think it would make sense to have him placed in your class's dorm building, and I would also like for you to be Aizu's caretaker." Mirio's eyes widened. "Really?" he asked, sounding a bit too hopeful. Nedzu nodded his head. "Of course. I can inform the changes to your homeroom teacher as well as your classmates, and I'll be sure to have the new living arrangements set in place before you return to campus. But nothing too over the top. If anything, you'll both just end up being dorm neighbors." This was something Mirio did not expect to happen at all. One minute, he was worried about Aizu being placed in the system where he would likely be treated poorly due to his being quirkless, to feeling utterly beside himself with happiness upon learning that Aizu would not only be living with him at school, but that he was going to be able to take care of the boy. However, Nedzu wasn't finished yet. "This doesn't mean that you can neglect your studies. Your grades aren't exactly the best, and focusing all of your attention and energy on taking care of young Aizu will cause you to fall behind. Which is why I'm planning on having a small daycare installed in the main building where Aizu can stay during the day. You'll get to focus on your classes and training while Aizu is being looked after, and once your classes are done, you'll get to take over watching him." Principal Nedzu, Mirio was speechless. He knew that Nedzu was a kind and considerate person, but for him to go so far as to incorporate a childcare facility into the school just for Aizu, likely given his young age and the likelihood of him not receiving adequate teaching while under the villain's care, it was enough to leave the normally carefree and often goofy young hero at a loss for words. You got it, sir. Thank you very much. I promise I'll take good care of him. I won't let you guys down." This made Nedza laugh. Always so eager and ready to tackle any challenge head-on. "I expected no less from an outstanding young hero like yourself." The principal hopped off the chair and prepared to leave, but not before turning back and saying, "And remember, Mirio, you're more than welcome to come to one of us if you're in need of assistance. I'm certain any of the teachers would be more than happy to help you with tending to the boy. As the saying goes, it takes an entire village to raise a single child." Mirio laughed at that. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Principal." Netsu said his goodbyes before taking his leave. All Might, Sir and Tsukachi followed soon after, saying goodbye to Mirio before promptly leaving the teen alone with the slumbering boy. He glanced down at Aizu and smiled tenderly. I promised not to turn my back on you, and I'm planning to keep that promise. He whispered softly before using his hand to brush some of Aizu's hair out of his face and tuck it behind his ear. I'll be the kind of hero you can look up to, and I won't let anything happen to you. I promise. Sometime later, Aizu started to slowly wake up from his nap. He panicked at first when he realized he was no longer being held by Mirio and he didn't see him anywhere in the room. But before he could become more distressed and frantic, he instantly calmed down as soon as he saw the teen re-enter the room while carrying a tray of food. Hey there, buddy. Mirio greeted cheerfully with a big smile. Did you have a nice nap? Aizu nodded silently while watching the teen set the tray on a small roll-out table and pull it closer to the bed. Sorry about that, Aizu. I just stepped out for a sec to get you something to eat. You hungry? A loud, rumbling growl was his answer, causing Aizu to blush with embarrassment. Miro chuckled. I'll take that as a yes. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, but he noticed Aizu was just staring at the plate of curry and rice. This worried the teen. Aizu? What's wrong? Aren't you hungry? He pressed gently. Do you not like curry? I can get you something else, if you want. A few seconds of silence stretched out for a bit before Aizu began to speak, his voice so soft and quiet, Mirio almost had to strain his ears just to hear him. I won't get in trouble? The teen was caught off guard by the question but tried to play it off with a light-hearted chuckle. Get in trouble for what, Aizu? Being hungry? He asked in a semi-joking manner, hoping that the boy was only kidding, but he wasn't. Losing his joking tone of voice, Mirio said, Aizu, no, you won't get in trouble. Why would you? The boy turned his gaze back to the food and responded with, whenever I get in trouble, I'm not allowed to eat. And I've been a bad boy. Why do you say that? Mirio pressed. Aizu's bottom lip trembled softly. I made noise when I wasn't supposed to, and I made Shigaraki and Overhaul really mad for not listening to them. They'll be even more mad if I eat when I wasn't supposed to. A single tear rolled down the boy's cheek. Mirio instantly wiped it away with his thumb and said, Aizu, you don't have to be scared. You're not going back there with them. Aizu looked back at him with a bit of surprise. I'm not? He asked, sounding genuinely shocked by this. Mirio smiled and shook his head. Nope. I'm not letting you go back to that awful place, and I won't let them take you back either. None of yous will. So, don't you worry. He stared at the teen for a moment. Where will I go then? Mirio flashed a toothy grin at the boy. You're gonna come live with me and my classmates at school. UA High, the top hero academy in the country. It's where some of the best heroes go to study and train, and I'm a student there. The boy had a wondrous and awestruck look on his face. You live at school? He sounded more intrigued. Mirio nodded proudly. Yep, sure do. And soon you will too. He chuckled at the boy's expression, looking as though he'd just been told he was going to the zoo or an amusement park, before he gently encouraged Aizu to eat. Try eating a few bites, okay? It'll help make you feel better. Nodding his head and even managing a tiniest smile he could, Aizu picked up the spoon and slowly started to eat some of the now lukewarm curry and rice. The moment the first spoonful of food touched his tongue, he began to viciously shoveling the food into his waiting mouth. It was as if the child hadn't eaten in weeks, which is likely the case. Mirio laughed lightly. Slow down, Aizu, slow down. You'll choke if you eat too fast. Aizu did as he was told and slowed down, making the teen laugh some more when he saw the child's face covered in curry sauce. Grabbing a couple of tissues from the tissue box on the nightstand, Mirio carefully wiped the sauce from the boy's cheeks. Aizu, you're supposed to eat the food, not wear it. Surprisingly, this caused a tiny giggle to leave Aizu's lips, a sound which made Mirio feel unusually warm and fuzzy inside. Once Aizu finished eating and his tummy was now full, Mirio tucked him under the covers and turned on some cartoons before informing Aizu that he had to return to school soon. This made the child frown, but he nodded his head in understanding. The doctor says that once you're healthy enough, you'll be able to leave the hospital and move in with me at school. Before that, Though, I'll take you shopping for some stuff for your new room. He stated cheerfully. We'll get you all kinds of new things. New clothes, shoes, toys, books, you name it. We'll even get you your very own bed. What do you think? Mirio felt his heart swell at the glimmer of excitement and hope in those large emerald eyes as Aizu nodded his head more, that tiny sliver of a smile attempting to spread more, but it looked as though Aizu wasn't able to smile more. No matter, a tiny little smile was better than none at all, and that was all that mattered to Mirio. Great. Now you get some sleep, Aizu. It's my day off from school tomorrow, so I'll see you first thing in the morning, okay? Aizu nodded before snuggling under the covers and nuzzling his face against the plush pillow. Mirio smiled and gently ruffled the boy's hair before leaving the room and heading for the front entrance. As he made his way down the sidewalk towards the train station, Mirio pulled his phone from his pocket and tapping the screen before pressing it to his ear. Hey, Dad. What's up? Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry if I worried you. Oh, okay, well that's good. Yeah. Listen, there's something I gotta tell you. Mind if I swing by the house for a bit? I'll explain when I get there. Okay, great. See you then. Bye, Dad. Love you. The evening after his visit with Aizu, Mirio arrived at his family home and was greeted by his awaiting father. They hugged each other and had a brief exchange before the father went to make them some tea. Meanwhile, Mirio sat down at the dining table while checking his emails on his phone, the noise from the TV playing softly in the background. After making tea and sitting down in the chair beside Mirio, the man asked, So, what was it you wanted to talk to me about, son? Everything okay with school? Taking a sip from his cup and casually setting it back down, Mirio turned to his dad with a smile and said, Well, you know about the rescue mission I was assigned to for my hero work study, right? The man nodded his head. Sure do. You really had me worried after that, huh? Mirio laughed. Yeah. Well, I can't say too much about it yet, but I saved a little boy that was being held captive by the villains during the raid, and, well, to make a long story short, I've been put in charge of looking after him. He's actually supposed to be coming to live at the dorms with me and my classmates either tomorrow or the day after. His father was silent for a beat, his expression changing ever so slightly to a look of intrigue and surprise, but not to the point that Mirio worried about his father's response. Sure enough, the man smiled and said, Well, son, you know I'll always be supportive of your decisions, no matter what they may be. That being said, are you sure you're going to be okay with this? I mean, not to discourage you or anything, but taking care of a child isn't exactly easy, huh? Mirio returned his father's kind smile and nodded. Yeah, I am. I know it won't be easy, but the principal said he would have the teaching staff help me out if I need it, and he's even working on getting a little daycare facility set up for him during the day while I'm in class. So, I'll be fine. The man tilted his head when he noticed his son's face take on a more serious look, his smile dropping slightly. None of the other heroes that day knew that Aizu was even there. The only reason I was able to discover him in the first place is because of luck. If I hadn't been there, or if I hadn't found him, chances are none of the others would have even thought to look for him, and Aizu would have been left to continue living in that hell, where he would be forced to endure whatever torture those monsters have been doing to him. Mirio, hey, it's okay, son. Just take it easy. The father placed his hand on the teen's shoulder to steady him and help him calm down. Taking slow, deep breaths, Mirio looked at his father and saw the understanding look in his eyes, his smile never leaving his features. I understand, son. There's no need for you to explain. If this is something you're certain of doing, and as long as you're able to balance your schoolwork with looking after this boy, then I have nothing against it. And of course, you can always come to me if you need anything. Mirio stared at his dad in stunned silence for a few seconds before his big, toothy grin graced his face again. Thanks, Dad. The man chuckled and ruffled his son's hair. Not a problem, Mirio. They stayed like that for some time, just drinking tea while Mirio told his dad more about Aizu. When the topic of Mirio taking Aizu to go shopping for new clothes and stuff for his new room came up, the man piped up and said, Does he have anything to wear when he leaves the hospital? The teen pondered this for a beat before shaking his head no. He then saw his father hop to his feet and respond with, Well, it's not too late yet, so why don't we go to the store and get him some clothes and shoes? Nothing too flashy, just something comfortable for him to wear. Mirio smiled warmly. Something told him that the man had already taken a liking to Aizu even before meeting him, plus it gave them some more time to spend together since they didn't get to see one another as often as they used to before Mirio moved into the dorms. Sure, sounds good. I think he'll like that. The next morning at around 8 a.m., Mirio waltzed happily into the hospital with a small shopping bag in tow and made his way to Aizu's room. Upon reaching the room, he smiled when he saw Aizu already awake and currently munching on some eggs. Good morning, Aizu. He greeted brightly and walked into the room, setting the bag in the chair beside the bed. Aizu gave a slight smile and greeted him back with a mouthful of eggs, making Mirio chuckle. Don't talk with your mouth full, Aizu. He scolded gently while ruffling his wild green curls. He's doing much better today. A female nurse informed happily as she entered the room with a friendly smile. His appetite seems to have improved, he's drinking more fluids and his vitals are looking really good. After we do a quick once-over, he should be cleared to go home. Mirio looked very pleased with this and thanked the woman before turning to Aizu with a big smile. You hear that, Aizu? You get to go home today. Isn't that awesome? Aizu nodded happily in response after finishing his breakfast. I get to go to your school? Mirio nodded while using a napkin to clean his face. That's right. You remember the name of my school? Aizu pondered the question for a moment while the nurse grabbed the now empty breakfast tray to wash and clean. He answered hesitantly, which earned him a bright grin from Mirio and a pat on the head. Yeah, you got it. You're so smart, Aizu. The boy let out a soft giggle and smiled proudly. The tender moment was cut short when the doctor walked into the room and cleared his throat, grabbing the attention of both Mirio and the nurse. Yep. He's making very good progress. He's rather underweight for his age, though, but as long as he eats regularly and gets plenty of exercise and rest, he should be back to a healthy weight in no time. It was then that a thought popped in Mirio's head. So, were you guys able to find out more about him? Like who his parents are or if they're still alive? He asked sheepishly, sounding both curious and a little worried. Actually, we did manage to find something. The doctor held out his hand to the nurse, and she handed him the clipboard she had been holding previously. The results of his blood work came back sometime early this morning, and according to his charts, he's 5 years old, although we still don't know his exact birthday, so it's hard to tell if he's just turned 5 or if he's 5 going on 6. Also, the results of his DNA test haven't come back yet, so we still don't know who his parents are, and as for his other records, I'm afraid that's something we don't have access to at the moment. You may have to talk with the detectives in charge of his case about it. Mirio nodded in understanding, still smiling. I see. Well, I appreciate you guys for what you've done. Of course. The doctor replied politely while skimming over Aizu's charts again. Mirio looked at Aizu again, a gentle smile on his face as he started to softly stroke the boy's cheek with his thumb. Oh, and one more thing, the teen heard the doctor announce, causing him to glance back curiously. He saw the doctor hand the nurse the clipboard and mutter something to her before she nodded and scurried out of the room. We were able to analyze his immune system based on the results of his blood work, and while his immune system appears fairly normal, it looks like he hasn't had all of his shots yet. He just needs a few vaccines for things like polio and tetanus. So he's going to need to get those shots done before he leaves here today. Upon hearing the word shots, Aizu immediately froze. Sensing the boy tensing up, Mirio turned to look at him and saw the color drain from his face and his eyes welling up with tears as he began to tremble. Hey, it's okay, Aizu. He tried to comfort him while the nurse returned with the vials of medicine and a few needles and syringes. The teen placed a tender hand on the boy's back and rubbed it soothingly, but it did little to calm him. You'll be okay, Aizu. It's not gonna be that bad, I promise. These shots are gonna make you healthy so you don't get sick. Just a few quick shots and you'll be all done. In and easy peasy, he assured, but Aizu was having none of it as he frantically shook his head back and forth, the tears finally spilling over. No, I don't like shots. He whimpered in protest, a shuddered sob erupting from his throat. I don't want to get shots. Shots hurt real bad. They gave me shots all the time, and it always hurt. I don't want it. I don't want it dash. Mirio wrapped his muscular arms around the sobbing boy and held him tenderly, rubbing his back and shushing him gently. Mirio took this time to cup the child's face with his hands while wiping his tears, gently lifting his head so the child was looking at him, but Aizu's gaze was locked on anything but Mirio. "Don't be scared, Aizu, it's gonna be okay. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere, okay? I'm gonna stay right here with you," he offered with a tender smile, but it didn't seem to do very much to comfort the distressed child. His crying did die down and turn into soft sniffles and hiccups, but he still refused to look Mirio in the eye. "Hey," Mirio whispered. Aizu slowly lifted his gaze and looked up at the teen. "Do you like ice cream?" Aizu stared at the teen in confusion before lowering his gaze again, his bottom lip wobbling pitifully. I've never had ice cream," he whispered with a sniffle. Mirio wiped away another stray tear while trying to ignore the sudden pain in his heart at the thought of Aizu, or any child, growing up and having never had ice cream before or not knowing what ice cream is. It's a type of frozen treat that's really sweet and comes in all kinds of different flavors: vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, mint, cookies and cream, you name it. You can even put different kinds of toppings on it, like chocolate syrup, whipped cream and sprinkles. After you get your shots, I'll take you to go get some. What do you say? Aizu was silent as he pondered over the offer. Mirio and the nurse and doctor waited patiently before he finally nodded his head and allowed Mirio to maneuver him into his lap so the doctor could administer the vaccines. Aizu was still tense in Mirio's hold, so he encouraged the child to close his eyes and take slow, deep breaths. Aizu did just that and tried his best to relax his body, even as he felt the alcohol swab being wiped onto his arm. "Alright, honey. You're gonna feel a slight prick and a bit of a sting, but it'll only be for a moment. Just a few seconds," the doctor assured him as he watched Aizu turn his head away and close his eyes, bracing himself. He hissed and whimpered upon feeling the first prick of the needle go into his arm, but quickly relaxed when he heard Mirio whisper gentle words of encouragement into his ear. Rinse and repeat. After the fourth and last shot, it was finally over. "There we go. All done," the doctor announced cheerfully before cleaning up and allowing the nurse to apply a colorful band-aid on his arm. Mirio smiled brightly at the boy and ruffled his hair. "Good job, Aizu. You did great." "Really?" Aizu asked shyly. Mirio nodded. You were so brave. I'm really proud of you." That made Aizu really happy as he smiled widely, showing off a set of pearly white teeth. After the doctor finished up and gave Mirio some documents to take home, the two were left alone again. "Alright let's get you changed so we can go. We've got a lot of things to do today." Aizu nodded and allowed the teen to help him get dressed. After helping Aizu get changed into his new clothes, which consisted of a red t-shirt with a rocket ship on the front, a pair of cargo shorts and sandals, they exited the building and found two people outside waiting for them, Sir Night Eye and All Might, or rather, Toshinori Yagi. "Hey you guys. What a surprise." Mirio walked over to where the men were standing while holding Aizu's hand in his own. "Hey there, Tagata," Toshinori greeted calmly, smiling fondly at the little boy. The man was in his true form, and he was dressed in his typical style of an oversized t-shirt and a baggy pair of jeans. His blonde hair, which was normally styled in a peace sign fashion, was more scraggly with the two pieces of fringe framing his bony face. "We heard you were planning to take little Aizu shopping for some things, so we figured you could use some help," Sir explained. Mirio smiled brightly and nodded. "Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks." He then felt a slight tug on the hem of his shirt. Looking down, he saw Aizu gazing cautiously at Toshinori. Mirio crouched down to the boy's level and took his small hands into his larger ones. "Aizu, you remember Sir Night Eye, don't you?" Aizu glanced at the glasses-wearing man, who gave the child a kind smile, before looking back at the teen and nodding his head slowly. "Well, this is his friend. Don't worry, he's really nice." Toshinori walked over to the boy, kneeled down and held out a lanky hand to the child, a friendly smile on his bony face. "Hello, Aizu. My name's Toshinori Yagi, but you can call me Mr. Toshi. It's nice to meet you." Aizu stared at the skinny man for a second or two before allowing him to take hold of his hand and shake it gently. "Nice to meet you too," the boy replied with a shy smile. Sir came over and said, Well, if everyone is ready, we can head down to the mall and see what we can find for Aizu. Hopefully it's not too packed. Mirio nodded and stood back up while taking hold of Aizu's hand again and following the two men to an awaiting car parked on the side. After getting Aizu buckled in, he slid inside and sat next to him, with both adults sitting in the front, before taking off down the road. A few minutes of peaceful silence passed with only the sound of the radio playing in the background and one of the heroes occasionally looking back to talk to either Mirio or Aizu and have a brief conversation before turning back to face forward while enjoying the drive. After staring out the window on his side for a bit, Mirio looked to his right to check on Aizu and felt his lips pulling upward into a smile as he saw the child staring intently out the window while watching all the tall buildings, trees, people and so on pass by as they sped down the street to their destination. The way he was staring out the window and moving his head side to side to take in all the sights made it look as though this was the first time Aizu had ever seen so many people and buildings before, or rather, this was the first time Aizu has ever been out, period. As much as it pained Mirio to think that Aizu has never experienced anything like this before and has missed out on so much in his short life, he also felt very excited and giddy that he would be the one to show Aizu everything the world has to offer and all the amazing things he's missed out on, including ice cream. Speaking of, "Hey sir," Mirio called out to the stoic man. Without taking his eyes off the road, he hummed in response to the teen's inquiry. "Would you mind stopping by the ice cream shop on the way to the mall? I promised Aizu I'd get him some ice cream as a reward for being brave while getting his shots." He glanced at Aizu from the corner of his eye and smirked at the wide-eyed dazzling look on the child's face. Allowing the corner of his mouth to raise up in a slight grin, Night Eye replied with, "I believe there's an ice cream store in the mall, so we'll get him some while we shop around." As they stopped at a red light, Night Eye used this time to look back at Aizu with that same smile and said to him, "Would that be all right with you?" The boy smiled back shyly and nodded his head, appearing to be a little more relaxed and comfortable around the typically stern man. He also seemed to be excited about getting to try something new, something that was apparently worth trying. Mirio felt his heart warm up inside. At least Aizu wasn't afraid of Sir Night Eye despite the man's normally cold and intimidating demeanor. Plus, it looked as though Night Eye wanted to help the child learn to be less wary and anxious around others and break out of his timid shell, or he was starting to grow soft for the child much like Mirio did, or both. Aizu was still very shy and scared of other adults and strangers in general, but he at least seemed to be comfortable around the select few like Sir and Toshinori. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and as long as it would help Aizu learn to trust others and not feel so afraid, that was all that mattered to Mirio. For now, he was focused on one thing: spoiling the crap out of this sweet little boy. The mall was quite busy with lots of people, old and young, coming and going. It made sense, given that it was a Sunday, and many school kids and adults were off. "Oh boy. Sure is busy today, huh?" Mirio stated. Aizu was walking beside him with his small hand firmly grasped within the teen's larger one, and Sir Night Eye and Toshinori walking on either side of the two boys. Glancing down at the small boy with a careful gaze and noticing the nervous look on his face, Mirio smiled softly and said, "You excited to go shopping, Aizu?" The boy looked up at the teen and stared at him for a moment, seemingly unsure of what to say. Mirio squeezed his hand gently. "You'll be okay. We'll stay right by your side so nobody tries to do anything, okay? No matter what, you've got us 3 bodyguards to look after you." That earned him a soft little giggle from the child as he nodded his head. While they continued walking for a bit, Mirio noticed Toshinori pull his wallet from his back pocket, where he pulled out a credit card from the slip and handed it to him. Mirio stared in confusion at the card before hesitantly taking it. "What's this for?" he asked while gazing down at the card in his hand. It was a deep blue card with UA's logo in big white letters on the front. What confused him about it the most was that his name was on the card. "It's from Principal Nedzu," Toshinori explained while closing his bill fold and tucking it back into his pocket. "Since you'll be in charge of taking care of Aizu during your last year at UA, he took the liberty of providing you with something to help you get whatever you need for Aizu in terms of clothes, books, toys, etc." Mirio's eyes widened in shock. This is very generous of Principal Nedzu, but he didn't have to do this. I'm willing to get him all that stuff myself." He exclaimed in protest while trying to hand him the card back, but was promptly denied. He insisted on it. He knew you would likely use some of your dorm's funds along with your personal student allowance to pay for Aizu's expenses. This is his way of giving you a hand. The funds from a private trust that'll feed money into your account so that you can take care of Aizu. If you have any questions, feel free to ask Mr. Nedzu. Mirio didn't know what to say. He was both stunned and overwhelmingly grateful for Nedzu's generosity and consideration for both his and Aizu's situation. As much as he wanted to protest and insist on returning the credit card, he knew that Toshinori was right. While he did have the necessary funds to get Aizu the bare essentials such as clothes, shoes and food, he wasn't exactly swimming in money, so it made sense that the school would offer him a decently sized nest egg in order to give Aizu whatever he would need to be happy and healthy. Blinking a couple of times, Mirio smiled widely while putting the card into his wallet and said, "I will, and I'll be sure to thank him in person when I get the chance. And thanks to you guys, too. I really appreciate all that you're doing." Toshinori smirked and nodded his head, as did Night-Eye. With that out of the way, they quickly made their way to the first stop on the list, the clothing department. Upon entering the large store, Night-Eye grabbed a shopping cart from the nearby cart corral before they proceeded further inside. Aizu was both mesmerized and a bit overwhelmed by the sheer size of the store. He stuck close to Mirio like glue by gripping onto his arm and holding on for dear life while averting everyone's gaze. After navigating through the endless racks of clothes and worming their way past the flood of people inhabiting the store, they finally found themselves in the children's section. "Alright, Aizu, we're gonna get you a few different outfits and stuff. If you see anything you like, just let me know and we'll put it in the cart." Aizu looked uncertain, but nodded his head anyway. They started with shirts and tops. There were several shelves with all types of tops in different styles, textures and colors. Mirio stayed close to the boy while allowing him to browse. Sir and Toshinori kept a close eye on the two. But Aizu didn't seem to be looking at anything on the shelves and was acting very nervous and skittish, like he was afraid of touching anything. "Aizu," Mirio called out, catching the boy's attention. "Do you see something you like?" he asked softly. Aizu looked at the stack of shirts and then back to him, his expression unsure and a bit hesitant. "Hey!" Mirio crouched down to Aizu's level. "What's the matter? Do you not like these clothes?" He watched the boy carefully and noticed him looking around and chewing on his bottom lip, his small hands wringing together anxiously. Aizu whispered. "He never picked any of my own clothes before. Is it really okay?" Mirio, now understanding what was going on, offered him a kind smile and said, "Of course, it is. You can pick whatever you want. If you see something you like, just let me know and we'll get it. And if you want, you can even try some stuff on to see if you like the way it looks on you." Aizu wasn't as stiff as he was just a moment ago, but he still looked unsure. Then, Mirio came up with an idea. "Do you want me to help you? I can pick out a few different things, and you can choose whichever ones I pick. Does that sound good?" That seemed to do the trick as Aizu nodded his head and even managed to give a tiny smile. Satisfied with the child's answer, Mirio began to pick out a few different t-shirts and allowed the boy to look through them before he chose the ones that caught his eye. Some of them were a plain solid color like red, blue, or orange. Others had different patterns and designs on them. After putting the ones Aizu had chosen in the cart and the rest back in their place, they moved on to the next row. After about 30 minutes, the cart was filled to the brim with 10 t-shirts, 10 long-sleeve shirts, hoodies and sweatshirts, 6 tank tops, a dozen pairs of shorts and jeans, 8 pairs of pajamas, including a few onesies that seemed to catch Aizu's eye, including All Might-themed ones, and 3 packets of underwear and socks. They even got him a pair of swim trunks for when it gets warm enough to go swimming. Mirio secretly hoped Aizu didn't know how to swim so he could be the one to teach him. Once the boy was satisfied with his selections, they proceeded to head to the checkout counter and pay for the clothes. While the cashier was scanning the items, Mirio peered down at Aizu and noticed that he had a big frown on his face. "Aizu? Hey, what's row dashed?" He paused when he paid close attention to the boy, and after a second or two, he saw what the issue was. Aizu was rubbing his hand over his arm, specifically over the scars that littered the pale skin. He also seemed to be trying to hide the scars on his arms by tugging on his shirt sleeve, trying to cover them as best as he could, but to no avail. To make matters worse, there were a couple of people standing in line behind them who were giving him strange looks and whispering amongst one another. Mirio quickly realized what was wrong and turned to the lady behind the counter and said, "Ma'am, may I see that, please?" He asked politely while pointing to the black long-sleeved shirt she just scanned and set aside. She smiled politely and nodded her head before handing him the shirt. He then handed his newly acquired credit card to Sir Nighthigh and said, "I'm gonna take Aizu to the dressing room. Mind taking care of this for me, sir?" The man nodded without a word. And Mirio took Aizu's hand into his and gently led him away from the line and towards the boys' dressing room. Once they were inside the small changing area, Mirio got down and held Aizu's hands in his own. "You wanna wear this under the shirt you have on now?" he asked while holding the shirt up. He didn't bring any attention to his scars or even mention them. Aizu didn't need that. Without missing a beat, Aizu nodded his head and allowed Mirio to help him get changed. While he did this, Mirio couldn't help but notice even more scars decorating his chest and stomach. These scars looked slightly different from the ones on his arms and legs. They looked more clean and precise, as if a surgical scalpel was used on his torso. Ignoring the burning hot rage bubbling deep inside his chest and surging through his body, Mirio smiled cheerfully and helped Aizu pull the red shirt over the long-sleeved one. "There we go. How's that?" Aizu turned to look at his reflection in the full-body mirror. The long sleeve was a tad big on him. The sleeves went past his wrists and covered over his palms, the hem and collar poking out from under the t-shirt. But aside from that, it did the trick in covering the unwanted scars along the boy's arms. There were scars on his legs too, but not as many as on his arms, and the ones that were visible were thankfully covered up by his shorts. Aizu turned back to face the teen and gave a very pleased smile. Mirio smiled back and patted his head. "That's much better, huh?" Aizu nodded vigorously, thanking Mirio for his help. After that, the two exited the changing room and found Sir and Toshinori waiting for them by the entrance of the store, each of them carrying 2 handfuls of shopping bags. Once together again, the group continued with their shopping spree. Next thing on the list was shoes. They arrived at a nearby shoe store and began browsing around, and just like before, Mirio picked out a few different pairs of shoes and allowed Aizu to choose from the selections. After browsing all the different selections and trying on a few pairs, they left the store with 3 pairs of sneakers, a few pairs of sandals and flip-flops, and a pair of snow boots and galoshes. They even got a pair of red high-top sneakers that instantly caught the boy's eye and also insisted on wearing after they were paid for. If it put a smile on Aizu's face and made him happy, Mirio would let him wear whatever he wanted. After a few minutes of walking around, they then arrived at a large toy store. It was a little overwhelming at first due to how many kids and parents there were, but after taking him to a more secluded area away from the rowdy kids, Aizu relaxed a bit and found himself looking through the different toys, more notably the hero-themed action figures. They watched the boy handle each box with gentle care while gazing at each action figure kept inside the box behind the plastic sheet. When they noticed him grabbing a few more, Sir went to retrieve a small basket before walking over to the child, crouching down beside him and waiting patiently for the boy to notice him there, which he did. While hugging a box with an All Might figure inside, Aizu peered up at the pro-hero with a curious gaze. He didn't appear to be as relaxed as he was with Mirio, but at least he wasn't outright afraid of the man, which was good. Night-Eye smiled softly at the boy and said, "You like All Might, don't you?" Aizu hesitated for a moment before nodding his head without a word. This made Night-Eye smile even more. "Well then, why don't you set him in here?" He gestured to the basket beside him. "You should pick out a few others too. I bet it would make All Might very happy if you got him some friends." He insisted with a playful wink. The boy's eyes lit up as he happily set the All Might action figure inside the basket and began picking out other hero-themed action figures and toys, mostly All Might-themed ones. It was safe to say that All Might was currently his favorite. Sir Night-Eye made a mental note to make some time in the near future so that Aizu could visit the office and see his overwhelmingly extensive All Might collection. After purchasing the toys and leaving the store, Sir and Toshinori offered to drop the shopping bags off at the dorm while Mirio took Aizu to go get ice cream as promised. This caught Aizu's ear and he started bouncing on his feet with excitement. Mirio agreed and proceeded to take Aizu to the food court while the two heroes made their way back to the car, but not before Aizu insisted on hanging on to one of his new toys, specifically one of his new All Might action figures, to which the two heroes happily obliged. Aizu ended up settling for plain vanilla with chocolate sauce and rainbow sprinkles, while Mirio went with his go-to favorite flavor, chocolate with whipped cream and nuts. While eating his own treat, Mirio peered at Aizu and chuckled at the look of pure joy and bliss blossomed over his chocolate-covered face as he consumed his ice cream with vigor. "How do you like your ice cream, Aizu? Is it good?" he asked, knowing full well what the answer was, but wanted to hear him say it, anyway. With a dazzling look in his enormous emerald eyes, Aizu said, "Uh-huh. It's yummy but also really cold." Mirio laughed while grabbing some napkins and cleaning his cheeks. "Slow down, Aizu, you don't want to get brain freeze, do you?" he warned teasingly while Aizu continued to chow down on his ice cream, his newly beloved All Might doll laying on the table beside the boy. When he finished cleaning the child's face, Mirio felt his phone buzzing in his pocket indicating he'd gotten a new message. Upon checking, he saw that Toshinori had messaged him. "Hey, Tagata. Just wanted to let you know that Mr. Nedzu had gotten some of the teachers to help get Aizu's room ready. They're already putting the furniture and stuff together, and we're about to help them. Hope that's okay." Mirio glanced at Aizu, who was playing with his All Might action figure while quietly talking to himself. Smiling softly with a small chuckle, Mirio looked back at his phone and replied to the message. "Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure Aizu will love it. Take your time with it, no need to rush." Not even half a minute passed before Toshinori sent another message in reply to Mirio's. "Will do. Just give us about 30 minutes and we'll come back and pick you and Aizu up. Take care." Mirio noticed Aizu staring at his chocolate ice cream with a curious look. "You want to try some of mine?" he offered with a grin. Aizu nodded vigorously and leaned in closer. Scooping a tiny bit of chocolate ice cream with whipped cream and nuts, he held the spoon out to the child and allowed him to eat the frozen treat. The dazzling look that bloomed over his face as his eyes suddenly grew large and appeared to almost sparkle was by far the best thing Mirio had ever seen that day, and he hoped he could do more stuff to make the boy happy like he was now. Just then, he felt his phone buzz again with another message. It actually buzzed 2 more times with more incoming messages. Checking his phone, Mirio was surprised to see that Toshinori had sent him 3 images of Aizu's newly designed room. A wide grin spread over the teen's lips as he sent a reply. "Yeah, he's definitely going to like that. Can't wait to see his face." Exactly 30 minutes later, Mirio and Aizu were picked up from the mall and taken to the school. The moment Aizu walked through the entrance of High, his eyes grew huge with his mouth hanging open from surprise. It was somewhat comical. Upon reaching the front of the main building, the boys were greeted by some of the teachers, including Class 1 as homeroom teacher, Shoyuda Aizawa, also known as the Erasure Hero, Eraserhead, and Principal Nedzu himself. "Welcome to UA Academy. We've been expecting you," Nedzu stated cheerfully as he started walking over. Aizu, feeling a little wary of meeting so many people at once, hid behind Mirio's leg and clutched onto the pant leg tightly, to which the teen comforted the child by placing a hand on his back and saying, "It's all right, Aizu. This is Mr. Nedzu. He's the principal of this school, and he's really nice," he insisted. Aizu looked unsure for a moment as he stared at the small animal who was watching him with a patient gaze. "You're a pro hero?" Aizu asked shyly. Nedzu beamed with a happy smile before nodding. "Of course, my dear boy. We all are." The animal gestured to the teachers behind him, some of them offering him a small wave and a friendly smile. After a few seconds, Aizu slowly retreated from behind Mirio's leg and gave a tiny wave in return. His small hand still clutched onto Mirio's pant leg while his All Might toy was hugged against his small chest. "Don't worry, Aizu. You're safe here," Nedzu explained in a soft voice. "This school is home to some of the most talented and gifted heroes in training. Some of the best pro heroes in the country work here as teaching staff, and it is your home now." So with that out of the way, Nedzu held his short arms out. "Would you like to see where you'll be staying?" Aizu smiled and nodded happily. Mirio took hold of Aizu's hand again and bowed politely to the teachers before he led Aizu down the walkway towards the dorms, some of the teachers bidding the boy farewell while cooing at how cute he was. After a few minutes of walking, they finally arrived at Class 3B's dorm building. Mirio gave Aizu a quick tour of the common area on the ground floor before taking him upstairs to the third floor where his and Aizu's rooms were. The moment the teen opened the door to the boys' room, Aizu was completely stunned by what he saw. The bed had been dressed with brand new white sheets and a bright blue comforter. An adorable rabbit teddy sat propped against the plush white pillow. The shelf of the headboard was lined with a toy robot, a small stack of children's books, a cute alarm clock, and a box of tissues. On the wall perpendicular to the sliding glass door, which had yellow curtains hanging over it, were a couple of hero-themed posters which were framed and hung neatly on the wall. Near the foot of the bed was a large red beanbag chair and a big toy chest. The desk included a small yellow desk lamp, a pen holder, a few books wedged between child-themed bookends, and a couple of small organizers. A small wastebasket sat between the desk and wall, and a brand new bright yellow Randasir backpack hung on the back of the desk chair. On the wall above the desk was a child-friendly calendar and a long sky blue shelf where a few stuffed animals of varying sizes sat propped neatly on it. Next to the desk was a dresser with each individual drawer painted in a different color such as red, blue, green, and yellow, and on the top of the dresser were all of the hero-themed action figures the boy had picked out lined up while they were all positioned in their unique signature hero poses. A medium-sized bookcase filled with all kinds of books, toys, and knickknacks sat next to the dresser. In the center of the room was a round kotatsu with a couple of plush cushions tucked under it with a large, plush lime green rug underneath it. And finally, hanging from the top edges and lining the walls was what looked to be starry fairy string lights. It was hard to tell if they were standard string lights or if they were those fancy rainbow-colored string lights, but Mirio was certain Aizu was going to love them. Mirio noticed the way Aizu was slowly spinning around while taking in everything he saw. He didn't say a word as he walked around the room to get a better look at everything in it. His hands were fiddling nervously together as if he wanted to touch all the stuff he saw but was afraid to. "What do you think, Aizu? You like it?" Mirio asked. Aizu finally looked back at the teen. His expression was a bit unreadable. "Is this really my room?" he whispered, his hands wringing nervously together. Mirio walked over to the boy and got down on his knees. "Of course it is, Aizu. This is your room now. Everything in here is yours and nobody else's." He gave the boy a soft smile while placing a tender hand on top of his head. "If there's anything about the room that you don't like or want to change, all you have to do is ask." Aizu was about to say something in response to the teen's comment, but right as he was about to, "Mirio, there you are." The sudden shrill voice which belonged to a girl caused Aizu to yelp in surprise and Mirio to quickly stand back up and turn to face the door. It was then that Mirio saw his two close friends, Nijire Hadu and Tamaki Amajiki, standing in the doorway of Aizu's new room, the former being the one to have called out to the blonde teen. "Nijire, keep your voice down. You're being too loud," Tamaki warned half-heartedly. But that didn't stop Nijire from talking a mile a minute to their friend. "We were looking everywhere for you, Mirio. Why did you leave this morning? Was it for your hero work studies or something? And how come you didn't tell us so? Hey, who's this? Is this a friend of yours? Hi there." Before Mirio had a chance to say or do anything, the periwinkle-haired girl quickly walked over to Aizu, who was now hiding behind Mirio's legs much like he had before. Nijire was practically hovering over the cowering boy like a hungry, carnivorous predator leering over its scared prey. "And Nijire, stop. Back off, you're scaring him," Mirio frantically demanded while trying to keep calm and not scare Aizu more. Nijire suddenly looked down and saw the way poor Aizu was shaking while hiding his face against Mirio's thigh. Realizing what she was doing and how it was frightening the child, she immediately backed away, a look of genuine remorse and guilt on her face. "Oh gosh. I'm so sorry, little guy." Mirio took the time to crouch down to the boy's level again and hugged the boy close before turning to his curious friends. "It's a long story, but basically, I'm in charge of looking after him, and he's going to be living here under my care." His friends nodded in understanding as they watched Mirio pull away slightly and cup his hands over Aizu's cheeks while gently forcing the child to look at him. "It's okay, Aizu, don't be afraid. These are my friends, Nijire didn't mean to scare you, she just tends to get really excited about meeting new people. She and Tamaki are both students here, just like me. Aizu gazed at him sheepishly before glancing at Nijire and Tamaki, the former offering him a friendly, tender smile, before he looked back to Mirio. Your friends? Are they nice? He asked tentatively. Mirio nodded with a big grin. Yep. They sure are. Do you want to say hi to them? A few seconds passed before the boy silently nodded and turned to face the girl. Nijire got onto her knees and held her hand out to him, a gentle smile on her face. Hello, Aizu. My name's Nijire Hadu. It's nice to meet you. Aizu stared at her for a moment before slowly coming closer to her. His beloved All Might toy still hugged close to his chest, and sheepishly held his hand out to her, which she gently took hold of with both hands. Hi. It's nice to meet you too, he replied with a shy smile. Nijire beamed happily before gesturing to the raven-haired teen still standing anxiously in the doorway. And this is Tamaki Amajiki. He's a bit shy, but he's really nice, too. He and Mirio have been friends since elementary school. Tamaki gave a weak, shy smile while waving at the boy. Aizu waved back and his body seemed to relax some. He wasn't as tense and skittish as he was when they first arrived. He even felt comfortable enough to step closer to Nijire so that he was within arm's length of her. It seemed that Nijire's kind and affectionate nature helped to make the boy feel more safe and secure. I like your room, Aizu. I wish my room was like this. It's so bright and playful. Oh, look at all those toys. How cool. She pointed to the row of brand new action figures. Aizu instantly became absorbed in the girl's interest in his new room and began to check out more of his room. Mirio smiled warmly at the scene before him. It made him feel happy to see Aizu becoming more comfortable around the two teens, especially Nijire. He was worried that the boy would be scared of meeting his closest friends and would become more withdrawn or reclusive. But thankfully, that didn't seem to be the case. A few minutes later, Nijire turned her attention from Aizu's new toy box and said in a chipper voice, Hey, Mirio, have you shown Aizu your room yet? You guys are, like, right next door to each other. This caught Aizu's attention as he turned to face Mirio with a bright and curious gaze. Mirio smiled brightly and said, As a matter of fact, I haven't yet. Nijire got back to her feet and held out her hand to Aizu. Come on, Aizu. Let's go see Mirio's room. Aizu smiled at the girl and allowed her to take hold of his hand before leading him out of his room and going to Mirio's room, which was directly next door to Aizu's. Mirio's room looked like a typical teenage boy's room with a few knickknacks and trinkets here and there that just screamed, Mirio. The one thing that caught the child's interest most of all, though, was the impressive collection of video games lining the shelf of his small entertainment center below the flat-screen TV. Those games might be a bit mature for your age, Aizu? Mirio warned softly, smiling at the child's curiosity and interest. But tell you what, next time I'm at the mall, I'll be sure to get some kid-friendly games so that you can play too. Does that sound good? Aizu beamed happily and nodded at the offer. Hey, have you shown Aizu around the rest of the campus, Mirio? Nijire asked. Mirio shook his head no as he watched her smile enthusiastically and say, Well then, since it's still daylight out, why don't we show him around the school? I bet he'd like that. Mirio seemed to like that idea. While they wouldn't be able to show him everything, at least it would give them something to do. Plus, it would make sense if he got to see what the rest of UA was like since he would be living there. Aizu, you want to check out the rest of the school? He asked while peering down at the boy sitting on his knees and browsing through more of Mirio's things. The boy looked up at him and smiled before nodding. Come on, Aizu, Nijire exclaimed before holding out her hand out to the child, which he gladly took hold of while being led out of the teen's room, with Mirio and Tamaki trailing close beside the teen girl and child. Later that evening, after Nijire and Tamaki bid Aizu and Miri farewell before returning to their own dorm building, Mirio fed Aizu dinner and then led him to the bathroom to give him a bath. Though the latter task was more difficult than the teen had originally anticipated since Aizu refused to join Mirio and the other male students in the bathroom. Realizing what the problem was, or what he believed to be the problem, Mirio decided to wait until the rest of the boys were finished bathing to bathe himself and Aizu. But even if it was just the two of them, Mirio noticed how Aizu was acting very shy, wary and hesitant to strip off his clothes. After wrapping a towel around his nude waist, Mirio crouched down to the boy's level and said, "Aizu, do you want me to help you bathe?" Aizu didn't respond and kept his gaze trained to the tiled floor, his hands clenching and unclenching nervously. "Hey!" He felt Mirio place a gentle hand on his shoulder, which prompted him to look up at him, a kind and understanding look on the teen's face. "It's okay. It's just us here, nothing's going to happen to you, I promise." He remembered the numerous scars decorating Aizu's chest and stomach, and a sick, sinking feeling formed in his gut at the thought of what those monsters might have done to the child, especially for him to feel afraid to undress and bathe in front of another older male. He sincerely hoped that it was just him being paranoid. After a minute or so, Aizu finally agreed and began to strip off his clothes and underwear. Mirio gently led the child to one of the stools and proceeded to wash the child's body and hair while noticing the way Aizu would tense up whenever his hand got a little too close to his more private areas. He then allowed Aizu to wash the rest of his body while Mirio washed his own body so that Aizu would know what to do. Mirio felt his anger towards the villains growing more hot and intense, but he didn't allow it to show on his face as he focused on helping Aizu. "I swear to God, if I find out those bastards touched Aizu or did anything to him in that way, I'm going to hunt them down and make them wish they never laid a hand on him." Once they were both rinsed off and cleaned thoroughly, Mirio led Aizu to the large bath area. He got into the steaming hot water first before holding his hands out and gently guiding Aizu into the water. Once Aizu was waist-deep in the water, he sat down on one of the steps leading into the bath. Mirio sat next to him and they both enjoyed the hot water together. After about 5 minutes of comfortable silence and enjoying the relaxing bath, Mirio helped dry off Aizu and get dressed into one of his brand new All Might onesies, which he picked out himself. He then led Aizu into the common area where some of his classmates were hanging out and mingling. There was some kind of comedy show playing on the large TV. A few of the other students saw the child and happily greeted him before returning to what they were doing. Their homeroom teacher had explained to them Aizu's situation earlier in the day without giving away too much info about the boy, and further explained that Aizu would be living with them and that Mirio would be the one in charge of looking after them. They all seemed to understand and were sympathetic about the child's situation. Mirio noticed that Aizu was beginning to doze off while holding onto the teen's hand. His head began to loll to the side as he tried to stay awake. Checking the clock, which read 8:36 p.m., Mirio bent down and scooped the drowsy boy in his arms and cradled him to his muscular chest. "Come on, sleepyhead, let's get you to bed," Mirio said while heading for the elevator. Entering the boy's bedroom, Mirio pulled the covers back and gently laid the boy, who had completely fallen asleep at this point, against the soft pillow before pulling the covers back over the boy, ruffling his hair gently and standing back up to leave. But before he could do so, he was stopped upon hearing a soft mewling sound coming from the small lump under the thick covers. "Don't go," Aizu whimpered sleepily. "I don't want to sleep alone." Mirio turned back around and gave a sad smile before bending back down to the boy's side. "It's okay, Aizu. I'll be right next door, so I won't be too far away. I don't want to sleep in the dark. I'm scared of the dark. Please stay with me," Aizu protested meekly, the look of fatigue prominent on his face. It was then that Mirio remembered the string lights. "Hey, want to see something cool?" Mirio offered. Aizu paused before nodding silently. Hopping to his feet, Mirio walked over to the long shelf above the desk where he first noticed the switch for the lights. Upon pushing the switch on, the pitch-black room was suddenly illuminated in a soft rainbow glow that stretched along the top corners of the walls. Some of the lights were shaped like tiny stars that appeared to twinkle in the dark of the room. A soft gasp was the boy's reaction as he stared in awe at the lights. "And I almost forgot, I got you something while we were shopping." Mirio went to check one of the drawers of the boy's dresser before he found what he was looking for, an all-might nightlight. He plugged the nightlight into one of the exposed outlets, causing more light to softly illuminate the room. "There we go. How's that, Aizu? No more darkness?" Mirio turned to look at the child. Aizu looked quite content with the new lights and settled back under the covers while grabbing the bunny teddy and hugging it to his chest. Mirio smiled and walked back over to the child's side before bringing his hand up to stroke his hair out of his face. This made Aizu sigh contentedly as he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Sleep well, Aizu. Sweet dreams. He whispered before getting quietly exiting the room and gently closing the door behind him and heading to bed himself. Mirio woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual so he could get a head start on his morning routine, which consisted of going on his early morning jog, returning to the dorms and quickly showering, getting dressed, brushing his hair and teeth, and then eating breakfast. But now, he has a new addition to his routine, which is getting Aizu up and ready for the day, hence why he decided to wake up earlier than normal. He quickly got dressed into comfortable workout clothes, grabbed a water bottle from the mini fridge in his room and headed down the stairs and out the doors to begin his morning jog. While the training he received from both school and his work studies was more than enough of a workout for him, he wanted to stay in tip-top shape in order to maintain his physique so that he could better handle One for All's power. Plus, it was a great way to burn off steam and help clear his head. After about 30 minutes, he returned to the dorm building and took a quick shower, got dressed, brushed his hair and teeth, and then went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The common area was mostly empty aside from a couple other students. It was 6:30 a.m., so it made sense that some of the others were likely still asleep. He got started on making breakfast for both himself and Aizu, while also preparing a bento lunchbox for the child to have for lunch. He thought about letting the boy join him and his friends in the cafeteria, but knowing how being around large groups of people, especially strangers, made the child nervous and scared, that probably wasn't the wisest idea. Maybe once he's gotten used to being around so many people, Aizu will come around to it. A few minutes later, after he finished cooking the food and setting the table, Mirio went to go wake up Aizu, but as he reached the top of the stairs, he found Aizu standing in the hallway outside his room. His hair was a completely wild mess and his eyes were hazy and filled with sleep. His little bunny teddy clutched in his hand. Aizu, good morning. Mirio greeted cheerfully as he came over and picked the child up in his arms, hugging him close. I was just coming to get you. Did you sleep well? Mirio whispered while rubbing the boy's back. Aizu hummed in response while letting out a big yawn and snuggling sleepily into the teen. His bunny doll squished against his chest. Mirio walked back into the child's room and set him down on his feet. After quickly making his bed, he grabbed a few different outfits and laid them out on the bed, allowing Aizu to pick out which ones he wanted to wear. Aizu settled on a blue t-shirt under a cream-colored hoodie and a pair of jean shorts. It was a bit warm to be wearing long sleeves, but if it made Aizu happy, then that was all that mattered. Still, Mirio wished there was a better way for Aizu to feel comfortable in his clothes without worrying about his scars. After helping Aizu get dressed and then allowing Aizu to brush his teeth while he got to work taming his unruly bedhead, he led Aizu back into the dining area and having him sit in one of the vacant chairs. Eat up, buddy. You've got a big day ahead of you today, Mirio said while taking a seat next to the boy and digging into his own breakfast. While they enjoyed their food and the comfortable silence together, the sound of other students arriving into the common area filled the large, empty space. Some of them were still in their pajamas, others were dressed in their uniforms. A few of the girls noticed Aizu eating messily and greeted him while cooing over how cute he was. Aizu seemed pleased by the attention, but he didn't address any of the students and instead chose to focus on his breakfast. Aizu, my goodness. Mirio grabbed a napkin and cleaned Aizu's face, which was covered in sticky rice and bits of egg and tofu. I swear, somehow more food ends up on you than in you. You're not supposed to wear the food, silly. Aizu giggled at the teen's remarks, which made it a tad difficult to clean him, but Mirio didn't mind. How could he be mad at such a cute little face? By the time 7:30 rolled around, Mirio gently ordered the boy to wait for him by the door so he could get their bags ready before heading off to school. Upon exiting the dorm while holding Aizu's hand, Mirio smiled when he saw Nijire and Tamaki waiting for them, the girls smiling brightly and waving at them. Good morning, Mirio. Good morning, Aizu. Nijire greeted cheerfully. Aizu's face lit up upon seeing the kind girl as he quickly ran over to her and hugged her around her leg. Niji! Aizu exclaimed happily while looking up and smiling brightly at her. Nijire smiled even more and got onto her knees so she could hug the child properly, giggling as she felt him nuzzle his face into her hair while wrapping his arms around her neck. Hi, Aizu. It's good to see you again. The boy pulled away from her, still smiling, and then turned to Tamaki, who gazed at the boy shyly. Maki! Maki hugged. Aizu held his arms out to the raven-haired teen. Tamaki looked very anxious at first, but when the boy insisted on getting a hug from the introverted teen, he finally gave in and got on his knees and practically jumped back when Aizu ran into his awaiting arms and wrapped his own arms around Tamaki's neck, much like he did with Nijire. Tamaki stiffened up at first, but then quickly relaxed and hugged the boy back. He even managed a tiny smile. The scene made Mirio smile warmly as he walked over to his friends and said, "I'm happy that he's become more comfortable around you guys." Nijire got to her feet and smiled at the blonde. "I'm glad too. I would be sad if Aizu was afraid of us, but I'm so happy that he trusts us." After that, the four of them proceeded to make their way towards the school's main building while walking side by side. A minute of silence passed before Aizu glanced up at Mirio, who was holding his hand, and said sheepishly, "Your name's Mirio?" Mirio looked at the boy with a slightly confused look before smiling and giving a curt nod. "Yep, sure is." He beamed cheerfully, though the perplexed look on the child's face didn't go away. He even tilted his head to the side. "I thought your name was Lemlemillion," he commented while pressing a finger to his lip in a pondering fashion. "That's my hero name. My given name is Mirio Tagata." He flashed his trademark toothy smile at the boy. Nijire and Tamaki gazed at Aizu as he began to mutter Mirio's name to himself, sounding as though his voice was trying to savor the syllables of the teen's name on his tongue. After muttering to himself for a few seconds, he started to refer to Mirio as Miri, which the teen didn't mind. He thought it was cute. They continued to walk down the walkway towards the school when Aizu looked up at Nijire and asked, "What's your hero name, Niji?" Nijire instantly perked up with a bright smile. My hero name is Nijire-chan. And Tamaki's is Sun Eater. Oh, and Mirio's is Lemillion, though you probably already knew that, ha. Still, it's pretty cool." Aizu's eyes sparkled with wonderment as he let go of Mirio's hand and took hold of the girl's hand with both of his. "I like your hero name, Niji. It's really cute." "Aw, thank you, Aizu. Sun Eater is a really cool name too, huh?" "I think it is." Mirio came up with it himself. Aizu's eyes grew wider. "He did." Nijire nodded enthusiastically as she told Aizu all about how they picked out their hero names, while it made Tamaki feel anxious and a bit embarrassed whenever one of his friends, especially Nijire, would tell other about the origin of his hero name. To others, he surprisingly didn't mind that much when she told Aizu. Something about the child's genuine intrigue and enthusiasm made him feel at ease. It made Mirio immensely happy to see the child interacting with his friends and opening up more. Hopefully, he'll be able to help Aizu open up to others and learn to not be so shy around strangers. One day at a time, baby steps. Once they arrived at the main building, Mirio led Aizu down one of the halls with his friends close behind before they arrived at their destination. Nedzu had recently taken one of vacant classrooms used for after-school club activities and converted it into a daycare center for Aizu. It looked just like any ordinary daycare classroom with a little desk and chair, childish cubby shelves and wall hooks, a round table with a few small chairs for lunchtime, a play area and an area for nap time. It was honestly an adorable thing to see, and a huge juxtaposition from their boring, regular classrooms. Upon entering the daycare, Mirio spotted a woman standing in the center of the room. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s with short brown hair and green eyes. She was wearing a powder blue polo shirt with a pink apron draped over it and a pair of khaki pants. "Hello." The woman greeted politely with a sweet smile. "You must be Mirio. My name is Mami Takahara. I was hired by Mr. Nedzu to come and look after little Aizu. And this must be him." She got down to Aizu's level and offered him a gentle smile. "Hello, Aizu. It's nice to meet you. My name is Mami. I'm gonna be taking care of you while Mirio-kun and his friends are in class." Aizu stared at the woman nervously before gazing up at Mirio. "I don't get to go to class with you, Miri?" he asked tentatively. Mirio's smile fell a bit as he shook his head, though his heart did swell at the cute nickname the child gave him. "No. I'm sorry, Aizu, but I'm afraid you can't come to class with me. But don't worry, you'll be just fine here. Miss Mommy will look after you." He offered another gentle smile, but it quickly fell when he saw tears welling up in Aizu's eyes. Immediately, Mirio got onto his knees and pulled the child in for a hug while stroking his back. It did little to calm the child down as he began to cry. Aizu. Hey, it's okay, Aizu. It's okay. Don't cry, Aizu, please don't cry. He did his best to soothe the child and assure him that everything was okay, but Aizu was having none of it. No. I don't want to be by myself. I want to go to class with you, Miri. I want to stay with you and Niji and Maki. Please, let me come with you. Don't leave me. Aizu continued to sob and wail as more tears spilled down his cheeks. Mirio continued to hug the boy and shush him while sending an apologetic look to the woman, who gave him a kind and understanding smile. Mirio knew that Aizu would likely throw a fit upon learning that he would be forced to stay put while he went to his classes, but it still didn't prepare him for this. He hated seeing the child like this, and wished with all his heart that he could bring Aizu with him to class. Aizu, Mirio pulled away slightly so he could look at Aizu, who was still sniffling and whimpering with tears and snot covering his face. You don't have to be scared, Aizu. Miss Mommy's not going to hurt you, she's here to take care of you and teach you all kinds of things. I'll only be gone for a few hours, and I promise you'll see me again later today. Aizu pondered over his words while still sniffling and hiccuping. Then, he said in a quiet voice, You promise you'll come back? You won't leave me? Mirio looked genuinely shocked that the boy would even consider the idea of being left alone, but then again, considering his background, it's all too possible that the child has felt abandoned at some point, and it truly broke his heart. Of course I'll come back. I would never leave you behind, Aizu. And Nijire and Tamaki would never leave you. He ruffled the boy's hair softly. You'll be here for a little while, and as soon as classes are over, I'll come and pick you up and take you home. I'll even swing by during lunch and pay you a visit. What do you say? Aizu thought about it for a moment while using his sleeve to wipe his nose. Will Niji and Maki be there too? Of course we will, Zuzu. Nijire responded happily as she got onto her knees beside Mirio and held her arms open to the boy, who instantly came over and allowed her to hug him tenderly. Tell you what, instead of eating lunch in the cafeteria, Mirio, Tamaki and I can come here and we can eat lunch together. It'll be lots of fun, won't it, Tamaki? She glanced up at the raven-haired teen who nodded sheepishly. Aizu cuddled against Nijire's chest and sighed. Oh, okay. I'll be a big boy and wait for you to come back. I'll be brave, Miri. Aizu replied while turning his head to look at Mirio, a smile spreading over his face despite the tears in his large eyes. Mirio smiled back. Great. I know you will be, Aizu. You're always so brave. Aizu gave everybody hugs and waved goodbye to the teens as he watched them walk down the hall to their classes before being led into the classroom by the kind and gentle woman to begin his lessons. Mirio felt a slight sting in his heart from making the child cry and leaving him like that, but he knew that Aizu would be okay once he got used to the temporary separation. He needed this, and while it was really tough to go through at first, he knew that everything would be alright in the end. Only 4 hours to go. Lunchtime rolled in and Mirio, Nijire and Tamaki made their way down the hall towards Aizu's classroom with their lunches in tow. Upon entering the daycare, Mirio instantly spotted the head of green curls sitting at the round table with his little bento box on the table. Mommy was busy cleaning the chalkboard while humming happily to herself. Mirio held his gaze on her for a few seconds while thinking to himself, I wonder what kind of quirk Miss Mommy has. Maybe it's got to do with her role as a kindergarten teacher? As soon as Aizu looked up and noticed Mirio, his face instantly lit up like a light bulb as he got out of his seat and ran over to the blonde teen. Miri! Aizu exclaimed with excitement as he hugged Mirio's legs. Miri, you came back. The teen laughed and got to the boy's level so he could hug him back while carefully balancing his food tray. Hey Aizu, of course I did. I told you I would. The boy pulled away and went to hug Nijire and Tamaki, which they gladly obliged. Once the hugs were distributed, Aizu grabbed hold of Mirio's hand and led him to the table. Come, Miri. And Niji and Maki, come. Everybody came to the table and took a seat, though the small chairs were a tad uncomfortable to sit in, so the teens chose to sit on their knees at the short table. What cha eating for lunch, Zuzu? Nijire asked curiously while gazing at the cute bento box. Aizu smiled sweetly and opened the lid to his bento box. "Look it!" he exclaimed with glee while holding his bento out for Nijire and Tamaki to see. The bento had 3 triangle-shaped rice balls in one compartment, and the smaller compartments had some beef, fruits and veggies. "Whoa, Aizu! How cute! That looks so yummy, I'm super jealous!" Nijire exclaimed in wonderment, which made Aizu giggle as he began to dig into his lunch. As they ate their lunch, Mirio would make small talk with the child and ask how he was doing and how he was liking his lessons. Aizu would reply by saying that he was having fun and his teacher was really nice to him and has been teaching him a lot. Halfway through their lunch, Aizu grew curious about what the others were eating and asked them if he could have a bite, to which they agreed. "This is beef ramen, my favorite," Mirio explained while using his chopsticks to hold out a small bit of noodles and meat to the child, who took a big bite out of it and let out a pleased hum. It's yummy," Aizu stated happily. He then turned to Tamaki, who was eating takoyaki. Tamaki offered Aizu a small bit of his food and was rewarded with a similar reaction to Mirio's ramen dish. Then it was Nijire's turn. "What's that, Niji?" Aizu asked curiously while staring at the steaming bowl of rice and meat. "This is katsudon. It's a pork cutlet bowl with rice, eggs, onions and all kinds of yummy things. Wanna try some, Zoo?" She grabbed a piece of pork and rice with her chopsticks and held it out to the child. Aizu opened his mouth and ate the offered food, and Mirio had never seen the child's eyes grow so big before. They looked like they were about to pop out of his head. Aizu looked like he had just reached cloud 9 as his eyes sparkled with delight and his mouth hung open with a driblet of drool hanging from the corner of it. Then suddenly he asked for more. Nijire gladly offered him another bite, and then another, and another. By the time he'd been given his 6th bite of Nijire's katsudon, the bowl was nearly half empty. "Aizu, don't eat all of her food, Nijire has to eat too," Mirio gently scolded, but he couldn't help the smile on his face. Aizu thanked Nijire for the food and returned to eating his own lunch, but not before offering to give the teens a bite of his food as thanks for them sharing their lunch. They happily took a small bite out of his rice and veggies and thanked him back. It looked like Mirio had just discovered Aizu's favorite food, and he would definitely have to remember to make it for lunch or dinner sometime. A few minutes later, the bell rang, indicating that the lunch period had ended, and the 3 students quickly gathered their now empty food trays and proceeded to leave the room, but not before giving Aizu another hug. "I want you to stay longer, Miri," Aizu whined with a pout. Mirio laughed softly and patted his head. "I know, Aizu. I want to stay longer, but I've got to go back to class. You'll see me again at the end of the day, though." Aizu peered up at the teen. "And Niji and Maki too?" Mirio smirked. "Yep. Niji and Maki too. Promise?" Aizu held out his hand to the teen, who took it and held it, smiling sweetly. "Promise." Aizu looked satisfied with the response and smiled from ear to ear while waving goodbye. Mirio, Nijire and Tamaki waved back and watched Aizu walk over to go sit at his little desk before they turned to leave. The end of the day finally rolled in, and Mirio had never walked through the halls and down the stairs faster in his entire time at UA. He had only one thing on his mind, Aizu. Upon reaching the ground level, he found Nijire and Tamaki waiting for him. All 3 of them walked together down the hall before reaching the now familiar classroom. They entered the room and saw the kind woman helping Aizu pack his bag with his school stuff, and as soon as Aizu spotted the teen, the child practically dropped his stuff as he ran over to him. Mirio lifted the child up off the ground and wrapped him in a tight hug. The boy snuggled into Mirio and wrapped his arms around his neck. It was honestly a really adorable thing to witness. "Hey Aizu, I missed you," Mirio stated cheerfully before setting the boy back down. "Did you have a good day?" Aizu nodded his head before going on about all the things he did. As he was listening to the child talk, Mirio noticed Mommy coming over to him before she whispered something in his ear. "I need to talk to you about something, and it's best if it's in private." "It's about Aizu." Nodding his head, Mirio looked to Aizu, who was now telling Nijire and Tamaki about his day. "Hey Aizu." The boy turned to face Mirio. "I need to stay and talk with your teacher for a bit. Are you okay with Nijire and Tamaki taking you home?" The child looked at the teens and then back at Mirio, appearing unsure. Mirio smiled and assured him by saying, "It won't be for long. I'll meet you at the dorms as soon as I'm done. If you ask him nicely, maybe Tamaki will let you borrow his video games and console. He's got a Nintendo and a ton of games that I'm sure you would like." Aizu beamed at this and then turned to the raven-haired teen who gave him a smirk. "Sure. Why not?" This made Aizu immensely happy as he took hold of his hand and bounced on his feet. Nijire and Tamaki promised to keep the child company and bid him farewell before leading him out of the classroom and down the hall, the three of them walking hand in hand. "So, what did you want to talk about? Is everything okay with Aizu?" he asked with a hint of worry. Mommy smiled and said, "Aizu is fine. He did very well on his first day and he seemed to really enjoy himself once he felt comfortable enough around me. Once he felt comfortable enough, he started to open up more and even asked questions about, well, anything. From what I can tell, he's a very curious child. He's very well behaved and obedient. He's great at problem solving, and while his reading and writing skills aren't the best, which is understandable for someone in his position, he's very quick to learn." Mirio raised an eyebrow. "But?" he pressed, knowing full well that there was more to what she was telling him. She gave him a worried glance. "I wasn't given all of the details on Aizu, but I was told by both the principal and the detective in charge of his case that he was a victim of severe abuse at the hands of a group of villains, and that you were the one who discovered him in their captivity and rescued him. Is this true?" Mirio nodded, a sad look adorning his features. Mommy hummed. "I thought so. Aizu seems to be quite attached to you, and he also seems to trust your friends a lot too, which is good. But despite his ability to learn and pick up on new skills rather quickly, I fear that the abuse he experienced may have affected him in more ways than one. Separation anxiety is just one of many symptoms he's likely to experience, and I have no doubt he will exhibit other traits and symptoms of a child who's been abused. This is where you come in, Mirio. I need you to pay close attention to his behavior and see if he begins to act or behave in unusual ways. If you noticed anything out of the ordinary, anything at all, you need to let either myself or the principal know so we take further action in providing him with help. Likewise, I'll be sure to do the same and let either of you know if he starts to act differently while in my care." Mirio grimaced at the new information, but nodded his head in understanding. "I understand. I'll be sure to keep an eye out on anything strange. Thank you so much for everything, Miss Mommy." Mirio bowed his head to the woman, who assured him that it was no trouble and she was happy to help. Mirio smiled back and then proceeded to leave, but before he could... "Oh, hold on. There's one more thing." Mirio turned to see Mommy rushing over to a small cabinet in the corner of the room that seemed to be where she kept her personal belongings. He then saw her walking over to him with a smile as she handed him a flat, white jar with a blue lid. "Here, this is for Aizu." Mirio took the jar from her and inspected it. His eyes widened when he saw the kanji written on the label. "Scar cream?" Mirio whispered to himself. Mommy smiled and nodded cheerfully. "I noticed the scars on his legs, figured he had more that he was hiding. So while Aizu was napping, I went and asked Recovery Girl if she had anything that would help. She gave me this to give to you, said it would help make the scars less noticeable. It's also supposed to help them fade after a while. Hopefully it'll do the trick." The teen smiled happily and thanked her again, for both the cream and for her help, before leaving the room and making his way back to the dorm. Day 1 was a success. It didn't take long for word to spread about a small child being seen with one of the members of the Big Three. While only a small handful of people, including the teaching staff and Mirio's classmates and friends, were fully aware of Aizu and his situation, that didn't keep gossip from reaching to every corner of the UA student body. Aizu's presence was like a tiny ember that had quickly turned into a raging fire that spread throughout the entire campus. Even the freshmen soon learned about Aizu, and he was currently the topic of discussion for the members of Class 1A. "Is it true that there's a little kid living on campus? I heard about it from some students during lunch, but I wasn't sure if it was actually true or not." "Yeah, I heard about that too. You think he's one of the teachers? Why would one of the teachers bring their own kid to live at school? What sense would that make? Plus, how do you even know he's even living here?" "You have a point. Actually, I think I may have seen him once." He was walking to school with a group of seniors. Ribbit? Seriously? So noisy. Tokoyami. Remove yourself from atop that desk immediately. Show some respect. Ida, you need to chill out, seriously? I wonder where he goes during the day? I haven't seen him around the rest of the campus, or at least, not while we're training. I think I overheard one of the students say that they saw what looked to be some kind of little kid's classroom somewhere in the halls. And according to them, the kid was being led by the members of the Big Three. What? Did you say the Big Three? Yeah, but I don't know if it's true or not. For all I know, she could have been making it up. A kid living on campus and going to a kindergarten class on school grounds seems a little too extreme to be just made up. Hey, Bakugu. What do you think, dude? Teach, you think I give a crap about some shitty little brat? Ah, come on, man. Don't be like that. What do you think, Eri? Well, if there is a little boy living at school, maybe we should look into it. I mean, I don't think it would hurt anything if we did. Great idea, Eri-chan. Let's find this kid and meet him. Hell yeah. The dorm building was silent aside from the sound of the gentle hum of the AC and slight snoring coming from a few of the rooms. Mirio was one of those individuals who was snoring while sleeping peacefully, or at least he was, until he was woken up by a gentle tug on his shirt sleeve and what sounded like faint whimpering and sniffles. He sat up suddenly, which evoked a soft gasp next to the bed, and as soon as he switched on the bedside lamp and the dark room was illuminated in a soft yellow glow, Mirio's panic was replaced with worry as his eyes landed on the trembling form of little Aizu. The child appeared distressed with tears rolling down his freckled cheeks and his beloved bunny teddy clutched tightly to his chest. Aizu, Mirio whispered as he adjusted himself so he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his voice filled with concern. Hey, what's wrong, Aizu? What's the matter? Aizu sniffled a bit before he whimpered out, scary dream. Mirio felt his heart squeeze in his chest at the sight of the frightened child. Quickly rubbing his eyes, he moved to sit on the edge of the bed and held his hands out to the boy. Hey, it's okay, Aizu. Come here. He instantly fell into the teen's arms and buried his face into Mirio's chest, muffled sobs escaping his lips. Mirio held the boy in his lap and gently rocked back and forth while rubbing the distressed child's back and whispering soothingly to him. It's all right, Aizu. You're all right. It was just a dream, it's not real. You're okay, everything's okay. I'm here, I've got you. Shushuth. A few moments passed before Mirio glanced at the digital alarm clock on the shelf and grimaced at the time. 1:12 a.m. It was way too early to be up and Mirio had classes in the morning. But loss of sleep be damned, Mirio wasn't going to turn Aizu away after he'd experienced a nightmare that was terrifying enough for him to seek comfort from his guardian. No matter the time, day or night, Mirio would be there for the little boy. He continued to soothe and comfort the child in his arms while shushing him and cooing sweet words to him. Aizu's sobs turned into soft hiccups after a little while as he snuggled into Mirio's chest and said in a soft voice, I am sorry. I'm sorry. Mirio hugged him tightly while shushing some more. Essie. It's okay, it's okay. Don't be sorry, Aizu. He rubbed Aizu's back some more, his movements slow and soft, before he carefully stood up while cradling the boy in his arms. Come on, let's get you back to bed. A distressed whimper cut Mirio off, followed by Aizu shaking his head, his bottom lip poking out and wobbling. Mirio let out a soft sigh, unsure of what to do to help the boy. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. You want some warm milk? Mirio asked softly. He remembered a time when he used to be scared of sleeping alone, and his father would warm up some milk to help him fall asleep. It always did the trick, so surely it'll do the same for Aizu. After a few seconds of keeping his gaze trained on his bunny, Aizu slowly nodded his head. Mirio made his way out of the room and towards the elevator. He reached the ground floor of the common area and headed for the kitchen, and while still holding Aizu, he grabbed a small pot, a carton of milk and a plastic cup and began to heat up the milk on the stove. A couple of minutes later, Mirio handed Aizu the cup of warm milk and gently coaxed him to take slow sips. Once the cup was empty, Mirio set the dish in the sink and began cooing softly to the child while rubbing his back and swaying to and fro. This, combined with the effects of the warm milk, was enough to lull Aizu back to sleep as his body became lax against the teen's chest, his face relaxed and peaceful looking. Mirio let out a sigh of relief and quietly made his way back to Aizu's room where he carefully tucked the boy into bed with his little bunny by his side. Brushing some hair out of the child's face, Mirio leaned forward and pressed a tender kiss to his temple before retreating back to his own room. It was the second night of Aizu's stay at Yue's dorms, and this was the first time since he arrived that he's woken up in the middle of the night due to a bad dream, and it likely won't be the last. Mirio was fully aware of what was to come with taking care of a child who's been a victim to abuse at the hands of dangerous villains, and no matter what, he was going to do everything in his power to make Aizu feel safe and loved. He has no idea what the child went through prior to getting rescued, and he's honestly not sure if he wants to know. That wouldn't stop him from making the villains pay for what they did, and the next time he saw them, Mirio would be sure to give them hell. As he made himself this silent promise, Mirio felt himself drifting off to sleep. Mirio woke up a few hours later, groggy but awake, nonetheless. He decided to skip his morning jog and instead chose to make Aizu a special lunch as a way to both surprise him and make him feel better after having such a rough night. He'd never made katsudon before, but there was a first time for everything, and it honestly didn't seem like a difficult dish. Once he was finished, he carefully prepared the child's bento box with the freshly made katsudon while adding in a healthy assortment of fruits and veggies. It didn't look anything like the katsudon Nijire had for lunch the other day, but at least it looked appetizing. After cleaning up his mess and preparing the rice cooker for their breakfast, Mirio went to go get Aizu, but just like the previous morning, he found Aizu standing outside his door waiting for him. He looked even groggier and more exhausted than he did the previous morning. "Hey there, Aizu," Mirio greeted while crouching down to the boy's level and pulled him in a hug. "Hey, buddy, good morning. Did you sleep well?" he asked while rubbing the boy's back and holding him close. To his dismay, Aizu slowly shook his head against his shoulder. Mirio pulled away enough to get a better look at the boy, and he felt his heart sank to his stomach upon seeing the tired and dejected look on Aizu's face, the dark circles under his eyes evident that the child did not get enough sleep last night. He could also see the redness that rimmed his emerald eyes and how they appeared to be slightly bloodshot, likely from crying in his sleep. Mirio absolutely could not stand to see the child look like that. Hopefully the katsudon he made for lunch will make him feel better. "Come here, Aizu." Mirio held his arms out and smiled softly as Aizu came over and was enveloped in his warm and comforting embrace before being lifted off the ground. "Let's get you dressed so we can get some food in your tummy." He then proceeded to walk into Aizu's room, and just like yesterday, allowed Aizu to pick out his own clothes. This time, however, Aizu wanted Mirio to pick out his clothes for him, which the teen didn't mind. He chose a simple green t-shirt, a white long-sleeve shirt, and a pair of brown shorts. He also grabbed the jar of scar cream Mommy had given him. After having Aizu undress, he began to carefully add a generous amount of the cool white cream to the marred areas of the child's skin before softly rubbing it in. Once he was done, Mirio began to help the child get dressed, but as he did so, he noticed Aizu was staring at the floor with a sad look in his tired eyes. Obviously, this worried Mirio immensely. "Aizu?" Mirio asked after tugging his shirt down and covering his stomach. "Hey, what's wrong?" He tried to coax the boy to look at him, but no such luck. After a moment of racking his brain and trying to figure out what has Aizu looking so down in the dumps, a sudden thought popped into Mirio's head as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Aizu, is this about the dream you had last night?" This got the boy's attention as he lifted his head and looked the teen in the eye. Mirio offered a gentle smile. "Do you want to talk about it? Your dream, I mean." Aizu thought about it for a bit before his bottom lip poked out, and he shook his head no while averting Mirio's gaze again. Mirio nodded his head in understanding. "That's okay, you don't have to tell me right away. Whenever you're ready to, you can come to me and tell me all about it. You can also tell Nijire, Tamaki, and even Miss Mommy if you want." Aizu stared at him for a second or two before nodding his head. He still looked tired and a bit unsure, but at least he seemed to be more relaxed and less tense. That was something. "Alrighty." Mirio hopped to his feet and held his hand out to the boy, who gladly took it. "Come on, Squirt, let's go get some breakfast." They went into the dining room where other students could be heard and seen eating and conversing with one another. A couple of them spotted little Aizu and greeted him cheerfully. At least they were friendly with the child, which Mirio was grateful for and appreciated. After eating their breakfast and finishing up with their morning routine, they found Nijire and Tamaki waiting for them outside again, which made Aizu happy despite how tired he looked, and all four of them made their way to school. Halfway there, Mirio begins to notice Aizu slowing down, and upon looking down he sees that the boy is starting to doze off while walking. He tries his best to keep his eyes open but to no avail. He then quickly scooped the child up and felt him snuggle into him as they continued towards their destination. When they arrived at the daycare, Mommy was there waiting for them just like yesterday morning, all smiley and cheerful. But the moment she saw Aizu being held by Mirio, she instantly came over, her face going from cheerful to concerned in an instant. What's the matter? Is he not feeling well? She asked gently while inspecting the boy. Mirio glanced down at the boy while sharing a similar worried expression as Mommy. He had a bad dream last night, and I don't think he got enough sleep because of it. He won't talk to me about it either, he explained with a look of concern. Mommy smiled in understanding and came closer. She placed her hand on the boy's back to get his attention. Aizu lifted his head and looked over his shoulder and saw the woman holding her arms out to him. Come here, sweetie. Aizu didn't hesitate as he allowed her to pull him out of Mirio's grasp. She cradled him to her chest like a baby while Aizu rested his cheek against her shoulder. Let's go take a nap, honey. It'll make you feel better. No. Aizu whined with a whimper while frantically shaking his head despite being tired and groggy. No nap. I don't want a nap. Aizu refused to sleep just so he could avoid living through whatever nightmare plagued his mind the previous night. Mommy shushed the child and rubbed his back soothingly before she decided that this was the best time to use her quirk on him. It was then that Mirio and his friends noticed a faint sweet smell permeating in the room, and it was coming from Mommy. Turns out, the sweet smell was actually lavender. Combined with the gentle cooing, the soothing back rubs and the lavender aroma surrounding him, Aizu snuggled into Mommy's chest more while letting out a content hum. Mirio smiled when he saw Aizu fully relax against Mommy to the point that he looked to be asleep. Mommy continued to coo at the child and rock him slightly while the lavender smell continued to permeate her body. Once the child had completely fallen asleep, she carried him over to where she'd laid out a small plush futon for Aizu to nap on and proceeded to tuck him in. There we go, she whispered with a triumphant grin. That'll help him relax. I'll let him rest for about an hour before beginning the lesson. Mirio approached her with a look of awe on his face at how easily she was able to get him to go to sleep. I take it that was your quirk, Miss Mommy? Mirio inquired. Mommy turned to face Mirio with a big smile. That's correct. My quirk allows me to produce and expel any scent I choose by using my own body's water weight. In this case, I wanted to help make Aizu feel more relaxed, so I produced the smell of lavender, which can cause the person to feel more relaxed and can also help them sleep better. When he's gotten plenty of rest, I'll produce a smell that's a mix between peppermint and citrus, which will help him feel more awake and alert. Mirio smiled. Wow, that actually sounds very useful. I'm surprised you're not a pro, huh? He said while walking over and checking up on Aizu, who was sound asleep under the thick covers, his little indoor slippers sitting beside the futon. Mommy let out a soft chuckle. I wanted to be a pro hero when I was a little girl, but my quirk wouldn't have been very practical in combat, and my parents didn't think I would enjoy it. But that's all right. I love what I do now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Working with children is honestly the best job I could ever ask for, and my quirk definitely comes in handy when working with children. Mirio smiled with a soft chuckle before standing back up and making his way towards the door, but not before he turned to Mommy and said he didn't want to talk to me about the nightmare he had, but if he decides to tell you, would you be sure to let me know, please? Mommy smiled brightly and nodded. With that, Mirio bid the woman farewell and went over to his friends who were waiting for him by the classroom entrance, and they made their way to class. Lunch rolled in a few hours later, and just like the day before, Mirio and company arrived at the daycare with their lunches in tow, looking forward to having lunch with the little green bundle of joy. Mirio smiled from ear to ear the moment he saw the bright and happy look on Aizu's face as he gazed at his bento box. Looks like making katsudon for the boy to cheer him up was the right call, judging by the ecstatic look on his freckled face. The teens were greeted by Mommy, who was sitting at the front desk and eating her own lunch while keeping a watchful eye on her little charge. "Hiya, Aizu." Nijire greeted Bubbly. Aizu beamed when he saw the senior trio. "Niji, look what Miri made me for lunch." He held his lunchbox out for the girl to get a better look, her expression matching Aizu's in terms of wondrous enthusiasm and interest. "Whoa! That looks super tasty, Aizu-chan." After showing off his lunch with a proud expression, Aizu and the other teens sat down and began to eat their food. Mirio was glad that his katsudon was able to make Aizu feel better. He was also very glad that he seemed to be much more lively and energetic thanks to the nap earlier that morning. Although he doubted that it would be the last time something like that would occur again, he was at least glad that there was a way to help him overcome it. They finished their lunches and prepared to bid the child farewell before heading off to class. Aizu was saddened to see Mirio go, but he knew that he would see the teen again later, and he instantly felt better. As Mirio and the others exited the hall leading to Aizu's classroom while conversing with one another, they didn't notice a small group of students, more specifically a group of freshmen, peering at him and his friends while looking towards the hallway where they had just left from. "You think that's where he is?" A girl with round blushing cheeks and big brown eyes whispered to her friends. It looks like that might be the case. We just saw that group of seniors leaving from that direction, and I think I just saw which classroom they came from." A tall boy with glasses and a rather serious-looking expression replied. Another boy with bright red hair and sharp-looking teeth turned to face another girl with long white hair, large red eyes and a single horn on the right side of her forehead. "What do you think, Eri-chan?" The girl named Eri nodded with a tender smile. "I think you may be right, Kirishima. But let's wait until after school to go and see him, right, Ida?" The tall glasses-wearing boy named Ida gave a curt nod. "Indeed. After our final class period concludes, we shall go and see if there is indeed a child among us on school grounds. I admit I am quite curious as to who this child is and why he's here." The students all hummed in agreement before climbing the stairs and returning to their class to patiently wait for the time to tick down. The last bell chimed, signifying the end of the school day. Students from every classroom flooded the halls of the main building as they made their way down to the ground level while conversing with one another. Aizu didn't pay any mind to the murmuring sounds coming from outside as he kept his focus on what he was doing, which was doodling on a sheet of drawing paper with several crayons scattered along the small table. A few other sheets of paper with various drawings laid over the surface of the table. Mommy was busying herself with tidying up while humming to herself and periodically looking over her shoulder to check on Aizu until she heard the sound of someone entering the room. She allowed a smile to spread over her face and turned around to greet who she believed to be Mirio coming to pick up Aizu, but was quickly surprised to find that it wasn't Mirio, but a group of students who she had never seen before instead. Instantly, she came over and approached the students. "Oh, hello there. May I help you?" she asked with a hint of caution in her voice. Ida cleared his throat and began to speak. "Our apologies, ma'am, but we're students from the hero course, and we heard there was a small child present on school grounds. We wanted to check and see if this was true." He peered over at the small child sitting at the table, who was now staring at the group of students that were clearly not Mirio, and he just sat there frozen and unmoving. Eri was the next one to speak with her hands held up in a surrender-type gesture when she noticed the skeptical look on the woman's face. "We just came to see him. If that's okay with you, ma'am, it'll only be for a moment. If not, then we can come back at another time." Mommy turned to look at Aizu and then back at the freshmen. There looked to be about 7 of them, and while she was sure that they were good kids, she didn't want to run the risk of causing Aizu any distress. "1 second, please," she said before turning and walking towards Aizu and crouching down beside him so that her back was turned to the students. "Aizu? There are some people here who want to meet you. They're students from the hero course. Do you want to see them?" she asked gently. She wasn't against the child meeting new people. Being a resident at a top hero school where hundreds upon hundreds of students congregated every day would eventually lead up to the child running into some students. However, she wanted to at least give him the option of meeting new people and not force him into interacting with them, especially since he tends to be very shy and anxious around strangers. Aizu looked over to the Class 1A students who gave him a kind smile. Some of the girls were waving at him and gushing over how adorable the child was. The boy looked back and forth between the students and mommy, seemingly contemplating whether he should meet them or not, and after a few more seconds passed, Aizu slowly nodded his head. I want to meet them, Aizu whispered. I want to try and be brave and make new friends, just like Niji and Maki. Satisfied with the child's answer, Mommy smiled with a nod before standing back up and making her way over to the eagerly awaiting 1A students. You guys can go and see him, but before you do, there are some ground rules you need to follow. Be very careful when approaching him. Make sure to keep your voices down and no shouting or yelling. Don't crowd around him or touch him unless he says it's okay to, and please, don't make any sudden movements. If you all can follow those rules, then you're welcome to go and meet him. The students looked at one another, confused by the rules and how specific they sounded. But they didn't argue with the woman or question her as they all nodded their heads, and one by one, they came closer to Aizu, who was now standing there anxiously. Hi there, little guy. The girl with long white hair and a single horn greeted in a gentle voice as she crouched down in front of the boy, an arm's length of distance between them. My name is Eri. What's your name? Aizu fiddled with his hands nervously before meeting the girl's kind gaze and managing a timid smile. Aizu. Eri smiled cheerfully at the boy, which seemed to help him relax, if not just a little bit. Then, the others filed in and introduced themselves in more or less the same fashion, some of them getting a little too into it. Good afternoon. I am Tenya Ida. I am president of Class 1A of the Hero course. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Hiya. I'm Mina Ishido. Nice to meet Aizu-chan. I'm Ochako Kahihi. It's nice to meet you. My name's Tsuyu Azui, but you can call me Tsu. All of my friends do. Ribbit? The name's Kirishima. I drew Kirishima. Nice to meet you, lil dude. I'm Toru Hagakure. Mommy smiled as she watched Aizu's body relax, and he even appeared to be openly curious about each of the students and their unique features. Perhaps Mirio's influence may help him break out of his timid shell and not be so scared around others. That is, until the students started to get a little bit carried away with talking to Aizu. Oh hey, whatcha drawing Aizu? Is that a big dragon? It looks so cool. Hey, that is pretty cool. Oh hey, look at that one. No way, is that All Might? It is. That's pretty good, Aizu dash. No, it doesn't look like All Might. It looks more like, actually, I'm not sure who that's supposed to be. Aizu, do you like heroes? Who's your favorite pro hero? Do you like All Might? I think he's super cool. Totally manly. What kind of quirk do you have, Aizu-chan? I bet it's super neat. Hell yeah, it is. I'm willing to bet it's just as cool as Bakubro's. Ha. Aizu did his best to be polite. He didn't want to come off as rude to the students, especially when all they were doing was trying to get to know him better. He knew that it would make Mirio happy to see him opening up to others, and that's what he wanted to do, make Mirio happy and proud of him. But the endless flood of questions, especially the ones about his quirk, were making him feel immensely uncomfortable and even trapped. He could feel his palms beginning to grow clammy and his breathing was starting to turn uneven. This sudden change in the boy's demeanor caught the attention of both Mommy and some of the girls, including Eri. But just before anybody could say a word or stop the incessant questions, sorry I'm so late, Miss Mommy. I got held up after class let out, and my homeroom teacher wanted to speak with me about, what's going on here? Mirio stood there in the doorway of the daycare, panting and out of breath, and looked at all of the unfamiliar faces in the room. Everyone turned to look at the teen with equally confused and curious looks, and not a word was spoken for what felt like a whole hour but was really just a couple of seconds. The awkward silence was quickly broken, however, when Aizu caught a glimpse of the familiar blonde hair and yelled out, "Miri!" before immediately running past the small wall of students and into the arms of his temporary guardian. Miri! You're here, Miri!" Aizu chanted with glee while bouncing on the balls of his feet. Mirio laughed while hugging the boy close. Yep, I'm here, buddy. Sorry I'm late. I hope you didn't miss me too much. He then glanced up at the students who were still staring at him, some of them murmuring to each other, before Kirishima's face changed from confusion to shock as he stammered out while pointing at Mirio. Hey, aren't you? Holy crap, you're one of the big three, aren't you? A collective gasp was heard before the others, minus Eri and a couple of others, suddenly surrounded Mirio and Aizu, much to the latter's dismay. Mirio instantly diffused the situation by lifting Aizu off the ground and taking a big step back. Okay, just relax, everyone. Don't crowd Aizu too much, it scares him, he stated while checking Aizu to make sure he was okay, which he seemed to be judging by the way he was snuggling into him. The freshman students gave an apologetic look. Sorry about that, Kirishima laughed nervously. So, is he, like, your little brother or something? Mina asked. Mirio was caught off guard by the sudden question before he quickly stammered out a reply. No, he's not, I'm just looking after him, he said with a big grin, not noticing the subtle sadness in Aizu's eyes upon hearing that statement. Mirio had hoped this would be the end of the questions, but all it did was add fuel to the ever-growing fire as more and more questions came flying out of the Class 1A students' mouths. So then, how did you come to meet him? And why is he here? Is he one of the teachers? If so, that would explain why there's a daycare on campus. How come you're looking after him? Did something happen to him or his parents? Do the other teachers know about this? I would surely hope so. He's so cute. He reminds me of a tiny little bunny. The more questions were sent Mirio's way, the harder it became for him to both stay cool and calm while also keeping Aizu from freaking out, especially when one of the boys decided to come closer and get a peek at Aizu, who was ducking his head away from view. Okay guys, I understand you're all very curious about Aizu, but all I can say is that I've been put in charge of looking after him. He glanced down at Aizu, who was glancing at the students with a curious gaze. Mirio had a slightly serious look on his face as he remembered the day he first found Aizu. Eri came a little closer, an apologetic and remorseful look on her face. We're very sorry for intruding like this. We didn't mean to come off so aggressive, it's just, she wrung her hands nervously. We've been hearing rumors about a little boy being on campus, and we even found out that he was being sent to stay in one of the classrooms during the day, so we kind of got curious and, she averted Mirio's gaze and started to fidget nervously. But Mirio offered her a kind smile. I get it, it's fine. I don't mind it if Aizu meets new people. It's nothing against you guys, it's just that Aizu gets very nervous and scared around strangers, and he doesn't like being in large crowds, so please don't take it personally. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement, sharing a collective look of relief before they bid Mirio and Aizu farewell and thanked and apologized to both Mami and Mirio for the sudden intrusion. Once that was done, Mirio set Aizu back down so he could collect his things. He thanked Mami for her help again, and he and Aizu left the classroom together while Aizu began showing Mirio one of the drawings he did in class. Oh wow, Aizu! These are really good, he praised cheerfully. Is this one supposed to be me? He asked while holding up the drawing of him in his hero costume and appearing to be flying in the air around a bunch of puffy clouds. Aizu gave a toothy grin and nodded proudly. Mirio ruffled his hair and said, well, I know the perfect place for this, right above my bed. That way I can see it every morning when I wake up and every night when I go to bed. This made Aizu immensely happy as he began bouncing around while chanting about how he was going to make even more drawings for Mirio, as well as drawings for Nijire and Tamaki. Mirio laughed softly before he changed the subject. So, you got to meet some new people, I see, he stated in reference to the freshman students. Aizu looked up at him and nodded, though his expression was a bit hard to make out. Were they nice to you? Aizu nodded. They were. Mirio tilted his head. Did they make you feel nervous? He watched Aizu carefully as he tried to get a read on the child's mood. He didn't seem to be nervous or off-put by what just happened, but he also didn't look particularly thrilled that it did happen. Aizu managed to shrug his shoulders. I was a little scared, but I know that you want me to be brave and make lots of friends. I want to be a big boy and be real brave like Miri. I want to make more friends like Niji and Maki. Mirio smiled and nodded, happy that Aizu was at least trying. That's all he could ever ask of the boy was to try. The next day was somewhat the same as the day prior, minus Aizu having a nightmare and not getting enough sleep from it. The routine was more or less the same as it was before: drop Aizu off in the morning, come have lunch with him, and then pick him up after school and return home with him. And thanks to the help of his closest friends, the routine was never repetitive or boring, and it made the overall pacing very enjoyable for both Mirio and Aizu, which the former was happy with. However, after his third period class, Mirio was called into All Might's office, where he informed the team that Sir Night-Eye had called and needed him to come to his agency after lunch for a very important meeting in regards to a new mission. When asked how long the meeting would be for, All Might simply replied with, "Not sure, but Night-Eye said that your presence is very much needed. You'll likely also be doing some patrolling afterward too." In other words, Mirio would be gone for the rest of the day, and wouldn't be able to pick Aizu up after school. Great. During lunch, while Aizu munched on his food while talking with Nijire and Tamaki about his day, Mirio was trying to work up the courage to break the news to him, and in all honesty, he was probably making a bigger deal out of it than was necessary. "Well, here goes nothing. Hey Aizu." The boy turned to look at the teen. His cheeks were puffed out like a chipmunk from being filled with rice and meat before swallowing it down. "So, listen buddy. I've got a really important meeting to go to at Sir Night-Eye's office after lunch, and there's a chance that I'll be gone for most of the afternoon." He paused so that Aizu could take in the information, while also paying close attention to any changes in his mood or expression. As soon as he saw the child's brows furrow and his bottom lip poke out, he quickly tried to comfort him. "But don't worry," he frantically assured. "I'm only gonna be gone for a little while, and I promise to be back as soon as it's over." And also, he turned to his friends who were watching the teen. "Tamaki and Nijire will be here to come and pick you up after school. They'll keep you company until I get back dash." Actually," Tamaki interrupted the blonde while raising his hand up anxiously. "I got called in by Fat Gum earlier. He wants me to come out and do some patrolling around Esua. Said something about recent villain activities taking place in the Kansai region. So I won't be able to look after Aizu today." He ducked his head down and avoided Mirio's gaze. "Sorry, Mirio." The teen clapped him on the shoulder and offered him a friendly smile. "It's all good, man. No need to be sorry," he assured, though that didn't keep the subtle disappointment off of his face. "No worries, Mirio," Nijire chimed in. "I'll look after Zuzu. I'll come pick him up and wait for you at your dorm." She then turned to face Aizu, who still had a little pout on his face but thankfully didn't look as though he was about to start crying. "What do you think, Aizu? We can do all sorts of fun things. Like playing hide and seek, playing pretend superheroes. Ooh, maybe you can show me how to make one of those really awesome drawings you made before. They were so neat." She then leaned in closer so she could whisper something in his ear. "And if you want, I can show you my quirk and how it works." Followed by a playful wink. Aizu pondered over this for a beat. He still didn't seem to like the idea of Mirio being gone for most of the day, but he also wasn't against getting to spend time with Nijire, who has become somewhat of a big sister figure to him. After careful consideration, Aizu finally looked at the bubbly girl and nodded his head with a smile. "I want to play with Niji Wunshin." Mirio and Tamaki both had to stifle a laugh upon seeing the look on Nijire's face. She looked like she was about to die from the overwhelming amount of cuteness coming from Aizu before she squealed and gushed and then proceeded to lift Aizu out of his seat and prance around the room, all while little Aizu was squealing with laughter. Mirio smiled fondly at the scene before him. "Maybe this won't be so bad after all. At least I've got awesome friends like Tamaki and Nijire with me." After the lunch bell rang signifying the end of the lunch period, Mirio went to hug Aizu goodbye before pressing a kiss to his forehead, which elicited an "aw" from both Nijire and Mommy. "You be a good boy for your big sister while I'm gone, okay Aizu?" The child nodded happily. "You do as she says and listen to her, okay?" Another happy nod. "I will, Mirio. I'll be a very good boy." This made Mirio blush and also caused the two women to gush at the adorable display. Oddly enough, Mirio didn't particularly mind being called Big Brother, but still, he didn't want to hold on to it, either. Mostly because, well, he dreaded the day that his family would eventually come forth to reunite with him and inevitably take him back to his real home. He felt incredibly selfish for thinking like that. But no matter. Until the day came when his parents turned up to collect him and bring him back home where he could live a happy life as a normal, happy and healthy little boy. He would cherish each day, each second, that he had with this sweet and adorable child, and he would make sure to make the most of it. When the final bell rang at the end of the day, Isa stood next to Mommy with his little backpack while waiting patiently for Nijire to arrive. Not even 5 minutes after the bell rang, the periwinkle-haired girl poked her head in and smiled cheerfully. "Hiya, Izu-chan," she greeted in a sing-song voice. Izu instantly ran over to her and hugged her around her legs. "Niji!" He squealed happily while smiling up at her with a set of pearly white teeth. Come here, Izu." She bent down and picked him up off the ground and hugged him tightly. She giggled when he nuzzled her and wrapped his legs around her waist. "You ready to get going, Izu?" she asked while setting him back down. He nodded with a huge smile and took hold of her hand with both of his while bouncing on his feet. Mommy chuckled softly while handing Nijire a folder containing a couple of assignment sheets for Izu to work on at home, as well as a progress report form for her to give to Mirio when he returned from his work study. Nijire nodded in understanding before placing the form in her bag. She and Izu bid the woman farewell before leaving. Nijire hummed cheerfully while holding Izu's hand. The boy was still bouncing lightly on his feet while glancing up at the beautiful girl with a big smile, which she would return the compliment by saying how cute he is when he smiled like that. Occasionally, other students heading back to their dorms would catch a glance of the pair and would either ignore them or gush over the precious little boy. It was usually the latter. But then, as Nijire and Izu were halfway down the walkway, they suddenly heard someone calling out to Izu. Turning around, Nijire and Izu saw a few girls coming over to them, and said girls happened to be students from Class 1, Mina Ashido, Ochako Uraraka, Toru Hagakure, Tsuyu Azui and even Eri. "Izu." "Hey there." Mina greeted the boy. "It's good to see you again." The other girls nodded in unison. "Sorry for coming off so bluntly like we did the other day. I hope we didn't scare you too badly," Ochako stated apologetically. Izu was still for a moment before he relaxed and offered a shy smile at the girls. Nijire gazed at the freshmen curiously. "Are you guys friends of Izu?" she inquired. Eri was the next one to speak. "Well, not really, we met him yesterday, along with a few of our other classmates. We heard rumors about a little boy living on campus and we got a bit curious. Gotta say, he is so cute. I hope we didn't scare him yesterday. The others can be a bit abrasive at times, especially when meeting new people." "Ribbit?" Nijire giggled. "Oh, that's fine. I'm sure Izu didn't mind too much, isn't that right, Izu?" The boy looked up at her, his tiny hand still holding hers, and nodded his head while smiling timidly. "So, where's that Mirio guy at?" Mina asked while looking around. Nijire smiled. "Oh, he had to go in for his work study, same with Tamaki. So until he gets back, I'm looking after Zuzu." She reached her free hand down to gently scratch at the boy's cheek, which made him giggle. "We were actually on our way back to his dorm. We're gonna play all kinds of games together." Izu smiled cheerfully at the girl while swaying back and forth on the balls of his feet and using her arm as leverage. Then, a small gasp erupted from the small group of girls and one of them said, "Hey, why don't you both come over to our dorm building and spend some time with us?" Mina suggested. "The others have been dying to meet you, and I bet they would love to hang out with you. What do you say?" The other girls looked at the boy with hopeful expressions plastered on their faces. Nijire peered down at the boy with a gentle smile and said, "Do you want to go and meet the others, Izu? I'm sure Mirio won't." Izu looked at her, and turned to look at the girls and then back to Nijire again. He thought about it for a moment, the memory of meeting the rather colorful cast of people fresh in his mind, as well as the overwhelming feelings he felt during and afterward. But as much as he still felt anxious around so many people, especially a bunch of students from the hero course, he also felt very curious about getting to know them better and getting to learn and understand their quirks and how they work. He wants to be able to open up more, and this may just be the perfect way to do that. After a few more seconds passed, Izu looked at Nijire and nodded his head. "Yeah. I want to meet everyone, Niji. Can I?" he asked hesitantly. Nijire smiled from ear to ear and nodded. "You bet." She then turned to face the girls and said, "All right. You heard him, let's go. The girls all shared a look of ecstatic happiness and joy before beckoning the two to follow them towards their dorm building. Aiza could feel his stomach fluttering with a mix of overwhelming nervousness and excitement. Time to see what Class 1A is all about.